Well, welcome. Welcome, everyone. This is our fourth convening of the Kentucky United We Learn Council. So thank you for being here. It occurred to me this morning, we are actually halfway through. This is our fourth convening. We've got four to go. So we are halfway through. Feels like we just got started, or does it feel like, do y'all feel like it just started, or do you feel, are you all like, yep, we're about there? Okay, so to start off, just a reminder, with the facilities are the same way that you came in. You can go turn to the right. Restrooms are right there on the right-hand side. You'll have to reach around the wall to press that green button to get back through. Okay. Unfortunately, we don't have Audrey, our chair, or Penny, our vice chair, here with us for this convening. So y'all are stuck with me today and tomorrow. Let's see. We also have snacks in the back. So Andre, once again, Center for Assessment, brought lots of snacks for us. So yes, absolutely. There's water, there's coffee, there's all kinds of snacks back there. So please help yourself. It'll be there throughout the day today and tomorrow. I also want to make sure before I forget to thank our partners. We have so many partners who make all of this work possible for us. So from CIE, we have Gretchen and Donnie. From Center for Assessment, we have Andre. Where's Andre? There he is. From Lions Assessment, we have Susan. Where's Susan? Over there. From Knowledge Works, we have Lillian and John. Over that way. From Gray Matters, we have Tammy. Over here. From UK Next Gen, we have Karen Perry right up here. And then we have from Humro, Art and Brittany back in the back. Thank you. All right. Thank you all so much for all that you do. We really appreciate all of the effort that you put into helping us facilitate these convenings. All right. So we are going to start off with a word from our interim commissioner, Robin Kinney.
Thank you and welcome. What a beautiful spring day here in Kentucky. Sun is shining and allergies are flaring everywhere, right? So my throat is a little gunky this morning, so apologies for that. But I do want to welcome you all and extend a note of appreciation as well for your attendance, your time. We know your time is very valuable. But the fact that you've carved out time to come and spend with us on this important project shows how important it is for the students of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I also want to echo some of Karen's comments to thank our partners. You would not believe the amount of work that goes into just getting the convening together, but all the other work that's going on in between those convenings to get us ready for a great couple of days of discussion here. I also want to thank the Kentucky Department of Education staff. They work very, very hard in trying to support all the efforts going on with Kentucky United We Learn. And if I could just ask our KDE staff to kind of stand up and be recognized, I'm really proud of them. They work really, really hard on this. So we've got quite a few people here today. Thank you for allowing me to do that and recognize them. I also want to talk just a minute about why we're all here. And remember, it is to achieve that moonshot that you all adopted back in January. To build a prosperous Kentucky, we will launch an accountability system that is meaningful and useful to all learners. You know, that's a moonshot that is aspirational, certainly, but absolutely achievable. And that is the center of your focus each and every day here with us. I want to share with you a couple of things that I think will support the moonshot as we move forward. And one of those is we have just entered into a contract to hire our next commissioner of the Kentucky Department of Education. Dr. Robbie Fletcher, who is currently the superintendent at Lawrence County, We entered into a contract with him, and he was confirmed by the Senate, the Kentucky Senate, which is the first time that's been required here in Kentucky. And we worked very hard to identify the right person to, of course, lead the Kentucky Department of Education. But I want to share with you that the Kentucky Board of Education, one of their central things that they were looking for was someone that could support, continue, and build upon the work that's already happened with the Kentucky United We Learn Council, keep it moving forward, and achieve that moonshot. They were very strategic when they were looking for our next commissioner to be supportive of that. So Dr. Fletcher comes to us. He is currently the superintendent in Lawrence County, where he's been there for about 10 years. He is a graduate of Moorhead State and UK from his degrees. So he's a Kentuckian. He grew up in Kentucky schools and has worked his whole career in Kentucky schools. That was also a very important component that we heard from stakeholders across the Commonwealth, that we really want someone who understands what is happening in our schools and then can help us make it better. So we look forward to welcoming Dr. Fletcher on July 1st. He will join us then, and I know he will be in attendance at your future convenings, supporting, learning, and listening, as well as sharing the work that's been going on in his own district that really lives in this space. He is an innovator. He's an L3 participant. So they have a lot of good work happening in Lawrence County. So I'm sure he will have good ideas to bring to us as we scale upward. The other thing that I want to share with you real quickly before we dive into the work is I want to share with you sort of a message of hope and optimism and encouragement. I've had the opportunity to really travel some in my interim capacity, and innovation is happening, and deeper learning is happening. And I want you to be encouraged by that. Our goal is to get it to each and every child, that performance-based learning, defensive learning, all those types of things that really make learning fun. I also want to share with you that the most important thing that I see when I go into school districts, and I talk about this with staff and students, is the big smile on students' faces when I ask them about this different way of learning compared to how maybe they have learned in the past. So that's why we're all here. We've got to have those students engaged and enjoy learning, and then we have to figure out the accountability system that's going to measure that. So I just want to share with you that there's a lot of great things happening across Kentucky Public Schools. I've seen it firsthand. I know you see it firsthand because you work in our schools or with our districts, and so I know you see that as well. But I bring you that message of hope and encouragement as we continue our work today. Thank you so much, and I look forward to learning alongside you today.
All right. Did I skip anything? I don't think. Okay. I know on your table, on the back of where like the markers are, it tells you how to get onto the Wi-Fi. I think it says just to go to, is it KDE? But that I wasn't able to get in on that one. I went to KY Guest. So if you're having any problem, if you need to get on Wi-Fi and you're having problems, try KY Guest. That one seemed to be working better this morning. I also wanted to point out on your tables, we have several things. First of all, the charter. We're going to be voting on that charter in just a few minutes. So it was sent out to all of you a couple times between the last convening and today. But if you haven't had a chance to look at it, please go ahead and look at that now, because we will be voting on it very momentarily. You'll also see Kentucky Voices transcripts. You'll notice around the wall, we have a lot of posters up. Thank you to Gretchen for creating all of those posters. She's going to talk more about that content, but just for right now, for your knowledge, the transcripts of what's on those QR codes are there on the table in front of you. And then we also have our latest guide, Kentucky Innovation Guide. This came out from Sarah Snipes' group. So if you're curious or if you want to take one of those home at the end of the convening, you're welcome to do that. really great stuff going on. All right, let's go through the agenda. I will move out of the way. All right, like I said, we're going to vote on the charter and our new chair in just a moment. And then I'll be turning it over to Gretchen. Gretchen is going to talk about the posters around the wall and the work that we're doing to capture more voices. Then Sarah's going to join her to talk about design principles in student defenses of learning. We'll take a short break at about 10:25 and then come back and we'll hear from our friends from Shelby County. They'll be talking about what's going on with defenses of learning in their district. After that, we'll have Travis Hamby and Holly Elmore come up and talk about their L3 community of practice. And then we're going to have a gallery walk. So again, you know, like I said, there's these QR codes. After Gretchen talks about that, that'll be more clear to you, but you'll be able to get up and walk around and look at all of these posters. We'll then have lunch. Lunch will be up on the 5th floor. We've been up there before. So let's see, then we'll come back and we're going to introduce work groups. We did have some work groups back in the fall and we got really good feedback from all of you about participating in work groups. So we're going to do that again. We'll spend the rest of the afternoon in work groups. And then tomorrow we will also be talking in our work groups. All right. Any questions about the agenda? All right, then. Go ahead. We're going to then take a vote on our charter. We are going to just have a voice vote on this. This comes forward from the charter committee, so I don't need a motion. We are just going into a vote. All right. All those in favor of adopting the charter that we have sent out, please say aye. Are there any opposed? All right, we have a charter. Thank you all. And the other thing that we need to take care of is a new vice chair. So we had a couple nominations for a vice chair and we had one accept. So it is my pleasure that Jim Flynn has accepted the nomination of vice chair of the council. So all those in favor of Jim Flynn as our vice chair, please say aye. Any opposed? All right, Jim, congratulations. All right, I'll invite Gretchen up now.
Actually, Sarah, I wonder if you want to join now, because I think you should also introduce the other posters. We got 2 sets of posters. Oh, thanks. I can drive my own. Thank you. So last time we were together, I was in the Community Voices working group. And I know some of my colleagues and friends who were there last time are back again this time. Great to see you all again. And we had some discussion as a group about how this is really an unusually inclusive group already. And yet there are voices that aren't present with us when we meet this way. That might be because, like, for students, it's hard to get away from school. It might be you're a business owner and you're like, 2 full days? Forget it. I don't want to spend that much time in things, right? Like, they're just people for whom this mode of engagement is not great. And also there's like students who need to be at school because they are struggling with things and they shouldn't be spending time outside, but actually their voices are still really important. Or teachers who can't get away because there's no sub, right? There's all these people who we care about and we want to be hearing from and we want to be keeping with us while we do our work, even though they can't be in the room with us. And so we had this idea, which we have done one round of testing with, which was some of us could go out. And hopefully after today, everybody can go out. All of you can go out and have some conversations with folks and do audio recordings of their voices, which we then can organize and share in the room here so that we can spend a little bit of time hearing from other folks and keeping them in mind, remembering that that's who the moonshot is really about. It's about us designing something that's really useful to all students in Kentucky and the people who serve them most closely, right? So families and teachers and school leaders and community members who care about these things. So I had help from 2 people from the Knowledge Works team, and we went out on a tiny road trip. But we only got so far. We got around central Kentucky. We got into districts where Sarah could make introductions for us, and we heard from some students, we heard from teachers, and we recorded their voices. And when we go around the room, these posters that have QR codes and little quotes next to them, If you use your phone and hit the link that comes up when you view that QR code, and hopefully you have some earbuds with you. I know Karen welcomed you to do that before the meeting. You'll be able to listen to some voices of kids and teachers and leaders around the state talking with you about the things that really connect to the themes of the United We Learn report at the beginning of this whole work. So we asked them questions about when they feel like they belong at school. We asked them questions about deeper learning and their experiences with that. We asked them about just, frankly, what was like really fun and awesome learning, which elicited great information about deeper learning. We asked them about accountability and asked them, what do you feel accountable to? And how is that like or not like what the state has you feel accountable to? And heard really interesting things from a wide variety of folks. So there'll be time today to go out and visit with those posters. We're also going to play a few of those voices at the start of things here. But we also have a second set of posters that don't have QR codes. You want to just give a little intro to what those are? Thanks.
So we really and truly, if you go across the United States, something that really puts Kentucky on the map is that we truly have so many learning networks that are thriving and connecting teachers to other teachers and district leaders to other district leaders across the state. And there's just such a wraparound of supports for one another. And just one of the ways that our team in the Division of Innovative Learning supports that is with our Kentucky Innovative Learning Network. And so the other set of posters around the room are the result of some hard work from my colleague, Rob Collins. If you have questions about the ILN, please go see that guy in the back today. But last summer, we had our first ever exhibition of innovation and learning. And so to mirror the types of experiences we hope for students in our schools, we wanted to give district leaders and school leaders the same opportunity to lift up their learning, put themselves in a more vulnerable space to share out and get feedback for the work that they're doing in their districts. So just some of those posters are represented around the room. You'll see districts represented. You'll also see samplings of innovative teachers who are part of a fellowship with Rob as well. So we're just excited for you to get a glimpse into the work that's happening. One thing to note on those, they're specifically built around how their work connects to the three big ideas of United We Learn. So you'll see that evident on those posters as well as some of the images that are reflective of the work that's happening. I'm also really excited. If you're impressed by these posters, these are almost a year old at this point. So just imagine the work that's happened in the time since these have been created. And on that note, we will get a whole new set just in a few months in June as we celebrate for our second annual exhibition. So more to come from these folks. Thank you for checking those out today.
Great, thank you. So we're going to go ahead and hear a sample of these audio recordings. And this is just a few minutes, but I want you just to know sort of what you're going to hear as you go around. So we're going to play this for you. I think you have to hit the play. I don't know how to do that.
I definitely think now they're getting better with, throughout the 4 years, pushing people to actually develop those 6 skills. I don't know if some people, maybe they don't really care about having those skills, they just care about putting the presentation, doing well in the presentation, which, like, yes, obviously you need to know how to present well, but, you know, maybe they don't really care about the skills, maybe just pushing to really why these skills are important, why are we using these 6 skills, and I don't know, you know, there's all types of things when it comes to people with, you know, maybe they're not the best presenters, but they've done this thing, or maybe I don't know how to get it. It's okay. but I mean, I'm looking forward to presenting my senior POG because I think I've developed a lot of good things in those 6 areas to present. So I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward.
I'm pushing myself to new learning. Even though, like, in the process we're teaching other people in the class, but at the same time we're learning too while we're doing it. And we always, like, discover a lot of new things. And whenever we do passion projects, I notice that class, like, gives their full attention and is really kind when, like, us presenting.
We have a lot of students that love to just jump right in and just put something down to have something down, and this has really forced them to slow down show what they understand, what they know. And I know a lot of them were catching their mistakes when they were planning, and it helped to get it all down, see their mistake, and fix it before it's on the poster. And I think it just really, it forced them to dissect it and slow down for those kids. So.
And show all of the pieces, all the work to the pieces.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Basically, if you're having a problem, the teacher will usually like talk to you and ask you, like if a teacher seems like looks at you and seems that you're off, they will ask about your day. They will take time out of their time to come talk to you and ask you, oh, how are you? How's your day?
Yeah.
Are you good? Like you seem off today, and they will talk to you. They're not really like, oh, you seem off. Get back to work. They'll be like, oh, I see that you got something going on. You could take an off day. And it's the fact that they love you and they take care of you. And instead of like being a normal teacher and teaching, they also like communicate with you and they understand what's going on. And Mr. Miller, our principal, he also takes time.
I think we feel very accountable to the whole child, not just what is assessed on state accountability assessments, high stakes testing. We use iReady, we use CERT. The ACT is next week. All of those pieces are important, but also ensuring that those students sitting right there are having experiences that will shape them into global citizens, into lifelong learners, into effective communicators. And I hope that when you interview them, you see that that's what's happening. I would think you could interview a kindergarten student in this district and see that that's what's happening. We are creating individual humans, not all humans that look the same and act the same and talk the same and walk the same. And I think that's what we're accountable for, is ensuring that they're ready when they leave here, but also ensuring that they're ready.
Yeah.
You know, does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
Where we had talked about the criminal behavior and how different aspects of someone's life could lead to crime and deviance. And it really brings to perspective about how, like, we talked about the racial and classist biases in the justice system, and how some people only see one person's environment as a act of why they act the way they did, and about just them being their psychological to their environmental aspect of their life, of why they're a convict and how it feels after prison and after being convicted. And really, like, just doing all that research, it really enhances like the viewpoint of our world today of what it feels like to be outside and inside the justice system, since we only see what's on TV.
I had a similar experience this year. It was like I was really nervous going into it, but I just was really prepared for it. And so once I made my slideshow and realized that I did have information that could fit each of the categories, I realized my weaknesses and where I could improve, but I also had quite a few strengths that I could present to them, and they gave me really good feedback on it. And so once I finally finished it, I was relieved and excited about it and excited for my future. But I also have to notice those weaknesses that I did have.
Sure.
And yeah, so that's been helpful because I can now realize, oh, this is where I might need to ask for more help, or can have my teachers help me to better prepare myself for the next year.
All right. So those are a few of the voices, but there are 11 posters with 10 or so such quotes on them around the room. And when we have a break later today, we're going to ask you to engage with those. And I think, if each of us just listened to like 4 or 5 of those voices, we'd bring a lot of people into the room with us and keep them front of mind. And so I want to invite you to do that, and maybe also think about who's someone from home that you want to keep with you in your mind. I definitely have students who I keep in my mind all the time when I do my work. Now, think about who are you bringing with you, and also spend some time listening to these voices so we can bring all of them with us. Process-wise, I do just want to share with you that we met with the Commissioner's Youth Advisory Group yesterday. which was fantastic. Some of those folks are in the room here today. I said to them, and I'll say to you as a former high school principal, that was just like real fun to be in the room with a bunch of high school kids who are really curious about and exerting some leadership around public education. It was pretty great. But the reason we went there, Karen and Donnie and I and Tammy, lost track where Tammy is in the room, there you are, was to share with them this work and ask them to help us with it. And we have really the same ask of you, which is the process of doing this is pretty darn easy. We have figured out a way to make it easy to do. I will also say it is deeply pleasurable. It was really fun to go to the 4th grade classroom and listen to that little kid that talked about passion projects. Those kids had a lot to say, and the learning environment in that classroom is really different. And listening to their teacher about the way she does her work, there are quotes from her around the room in here too, was also really great. We learned about the way she works with families, not just as partners in their kids' learning, but as experts in content that she's not an expert in. When she has a kid who has a passion project that's deep into stuff about animals, she's like, I know some stuff about animals, but we have parents who know way more about animals than I do. And she talked about parents who are farmers and vets and people coming in and how willing and happy they were to be in the room when they knew their expertise was what was bringing them there, and that kids wanted to hear and learn from their expertise. And the room just felt really nice, right? And I know it seems awkward to ask someone, can I interview you? Like it's socially awkward. We don't really do that very much. But I promise that's the only awkward part. You ask somebody and that's awkward. You're like, can I just have like 5-10 minutes of your time? I know it's so awkward. I want to record your voice. And then you sit down with them. They're like, okay, reluctantly, right? You sit down and you ask them a question, like, tell me a story about some really powerful learning, like just a really fun learning experience you've had. Or you ask them a question about when have you as an adult in your school felt belonging and connection with other adults in your community? And they pause and they think and they share a beautiful story with you. And they feel good for having shared it. And it feels great to be the one who gets to hear it. So the process is easy. You have a little thing. You have many handouts today. One of them is this page here, which gives a little direction about how to do this, which really is just like sit down, use these questions. Our working group is probably going to revise these questions when we meet. So we'll send you out a new version that has even better questions because we've tested some of these and know how to make them better. And we'll keep testing them with one another. But sit down, have a conversation, ask a question or two in here. These questions are aimed at sort of different types of stakeholders that you might want to talk to. Record it on your phone, send it via email. There's an email address in there. The app that you use in your phone, whether it's Android or Apple, we've tested both. They all have functions that allow you just to direct email it out. So it's a pretty easy way to just do it, record it, send it. And when you send it, you just have to tell us the kind of person you were talking to, like this was a 4th grade student, right? Or this was a family member that has 3 kids in middle and high school, or an administrator, whatever. And tell us sort of thematically what it was about. And there's notes in there about the sort of themes we're looking for from United We Learn. The questions obviously correlate with those. That's it. It takes just a few minutes to have the conversation and just a few minutes to send them. But we want to make sure we get a broader group of voices than we have in this group. Even though this is 100 and some little voice clips around the room, they aren't still representative of the whole state and all the stakeholders we want to hear from, but we think it is a way we can hear from the whole state and stakeholders we want to hear more from. We just need your help in doing that. So the student advisors yesterday were very enthusiastic. One might suggest there's a challenge now that's been thrown down by the students to see if they or you might contribute more voices. They didn't make that challenge, but I'm going to say they were into it. And I predict right now that they will make many contributions. So hopefully this room does the same. So that's it for that on now, but we'll come back to that at lunch if you want to learn how to do it. Karen and Tammy and I are around to help with that. And then of course our working group will do more with that. So if you're like, I love this, I want to do it more. Also, small plug, there's a whole working group that's about community voices. You'll hear more about that later. But if you're into this, that might be a good place to come. I'm totally cheating. There is a competition going on among us about who can recruit more people. Andre has better paper on his 1-pager. Fine, Andre. I'm taking the moment I have to promote our group. All right. So shifting gears, we're going to do a little bit of trying to offer some framing this morning without offering too much. Like, I don't want to ask you to hold 7 different things in your mind while being in discussions today, But we do want to draw a couple of connections because we're going to have a little focus this morning on a particular practice on defenses of learning. And we want to explain why we're doing that. And really, there's just a few things we want to say about that. First, I just want to share why we're doing that at all. So defenses of learning, which we're going to get more into like what those are, and we're going to see some recorded ones in just a little bit here. They are one thing that a school or district might do to offer students a chance to really demonstrate what they know about a set of competencies like those that are in the graduate profile in Kentucky. That's a performance assessment, right? Performance assessment is not a good match for all kinds of learning, but it's pretty good for those kinds of competencies. And so it's a good match related to the profile. It's also something that's happening in the field a lot here. I think we've talked with you before about how many districts now have their own profiles that they've been building with communities. For many of them, the next thing they do is figure out what is a defensive learning that someone could do that's meaningful for the student and for community members who would come and witness that defensive learning. And so it's something happening around the state, which is another good reason for us to all learn a little bit more about it. Also, when we had a working group last time that was on the profile of a graduate, this came up in the working group, right? There was a lot of digging into what really is a graduate profile? How do these work? What do they make happen? And this is sort of a natural follow-on also to what came up in that working group last time. So lots of reasons to pay attention to it. The other one is we kind of want to use it to try and introduce the design principles that we've talked about before, which we're going to try and use to guide us as we continue to do our work together. So I'm going to try to like pull a few of these things together in hopes that it is not confusing and does help provide a sort of structure for paying attention and learning as we dig into defenses today. We'll all know in about 2 hours whether this works or not, but we're going to try. So we're starting from the biggest place here, which Commissioner Kennedy, you reminded us of, which is our moonshot. To build a prosperous Kentucky, we will launch an accountability system that is meaningful and useful to all our learners. That is what we are up to. How does that relate to the design principles? These are like system design principles that we've heard about before. These were created, I'm going to tell you more about this background later, but by one of the working groups, I'm sorry, committees, standing committee. The AI Standing Committee created these trying to synthesize values for us. But I just want to explain sort of how these things fit and like why do we even have design principles? So we have system aspirations, right? We have the moonshot, which says it very clearly. We also have the United We Learn report, which says a lot of stuff about how folks around the state would like accountability to feel, how they would like it to support improvement, how they would like it to work. We have those things. Those are our system aspirations. These design principles are the guardrails we're going to use to help us as we make design decisions. So they're not the design itself, but they're like, what is the stuff we care about, said as succinctly as we can, that we want to remember as we design, and we want to use when we take ideas we have out to test them with people, when we have like a concept we want to try, when we go out and talk to people, what are the sort of priorities we can share with them that let them know why we designed it the way we did? So then they can tell us like, oh yeah, that totally matches that priority. Or like, oh, actually from my perspective, no, it does not. So design principles help us make decisions about what we want to test, but they also help us communicate with people as we're testing. So we'll use them to decide sort of essential features of this accountability system, and we'll use them to then figure out what are the operational components. So I just want to give an example of like all the way through these circles, right? So we have the priority of this is useful to all learners, that system aspiration. One of the design principles that we have is that it's designed for local flexibility. There's a ton of feedback about that in the United We Learn report. There's a strong feeling in the state that local districts and local communities would like some way to have some part of what's unique to them and their context reflected in the way the state looks at the performance of their schools. So that is one of our design principles, design for local flexibility. What that might look like in terms of an essential feature is that we create a menu of options, meaning at the state level, we would determine that there are like 5. I'm making that number up. I don't know. There are 5 things a local community could choose from that they could do that's connected to their context, their local priorities, their local values, and we would figure out a way for that to have a place in the state accountability system. So if we were to create a menu of options, which is one of the things that we've been talking about, that might be one of the ways that we have like an essential feature, right? A new feature of the system is we have a menu of options. If we were to have that, we'd still need to rely on our design principles again to help us figure out like exactly how do we design those things. So let's say one of them is you could include defenses of learning that we're going to talk about today. Well, then what do the design principles tell us about the criteria that would need to be around that, such that we would know that we can use it as something inside a menu of options that aligns with our system aspirations, but also is like useful at a state level. You could create a lot of things that are really useful at a local level, but they're hard to sort of make useful when looking across districts and communities. So the design principles are meant to help us with this sort of conundrum, right? Of we have stuff we value, somehow we have to figure out how we're going to do it. The design principles should help us figure that out. Clear as mud, but we're going to keep going. So the reason we brought up the design principles is we're going to try and dig into those a little bit. Again, just to look at the relationship between some of the design principles, not all of them, thank goodness, because there are 10. We're not going to ask you to hold all 10. That's too much. Some connections between those design principles and defenses of learning, because as we continue to sort of contemplate a menu of options and we think about defenses as a thing that might have some place in there, we think engaging with the design principles and looking at this together might be a way for all of us to learn a little bit more or develop our thinking a little bit more sharply about how that might work. So we're going to connect those two things today, some design principles and defenses of learning. So just as a little reminder, these were created back in March of 23, a whole year ago, by the AI committee. And, oh, it's 12. I said it was 10. It's 12. It's even worse than I thought. It's 12. Okay. 12 design principles organized into 3 themes because 12 is too many things and 3 is better to hold in your mind. And they did this by researching local and global assessment and accountability systems. You remember they put together this big report of all this information they had gathered about that. They, of course, considered their collective experiences together as a group. And they also really, again, considered the United We Learn report, which is a gathering of voices from around the state. So they considered all those things to create these design principles, which again are meant to help us in these ways, to reflect on design decisions as we create prototypes. Prototypes, I feel like, is also sometimes an annoying word. What we mean by prototype is just a clear, good idea with well-defined like aspects, like it's a well-defined, clear thing that we can go talk to people and test with them, right? Later, we can build prototypes you actually try, like a working prototype. If you think about it like a machine, there's one phase where you talk to people and it's like, if you had a machine that did this stuff, what would you do? Like, would it work for you? Would it be good for you? Would you like it? And if they're like, yeah, but make it this way, then there's a point where you like build a machine and you actually let users mess around with the machine. Right now, we're talking about conceptual prototypes, okay? So clear, precise ideas about a thing we could try. We want to try a menu of options. We want it to have these components. If it had these components for you, local superintendent, how would that feel? If it had those components, families, how would that feel? That's where we're trying to get. So we'll use these design principles to help us get to a number of clear ideas that we can test with folks, be able to communicate with them about those ideas, and evaluate and refine those ideas so we get to something that we actually are going to design and implement all the way. I just want to say these design principles came from a standing committee. They did not come from God on a stone tablet. And as we do this process of working together, of taking a specific idea and bouncing against these design principles and taking it out and talking to folks in communities about it, we might decide our design principles need to be adjusted a little bit too. That's okay. That's like a normal thing that happens in a design process, is you sometimes have to tighten those parameters because you learn some things. When you go out and test real specific ideas, concrete ideas, you learn. So it may shape those too. So they're not from God. They're just from a working group that Andre helped facilitate. Okay? So close. So we have these, again, 12 principles. We're just going to focus on the first theme, which is prioritize student experiences and outcomes. So as we look at, I'm not going to read this on a slide, it's really tiny, but that's okay because you have a handout that has this on your table if you want to look at it later in great detail, okay? But theme 1 has these 3 principles together. Prioritize student experiences and outcomes includes design to support vibrant learning experiences, design with marginalized students at the center, and design to empower students as agents of their own learning. So we're asking you to keep this top of mind this morning because we're going to look at some defenses of learning. And we have a great little note-taking form that Sarah's going to introduce you in a little bit that asks you to, when you're watching these videos of defenses, to see if you can find some clues of these things. Do you see some clues that, like, this kid had a vibrant learning experience that they're talking about? Do you see some clues that they had some agency as a learner in this experience or in learning experiences that they're referring to while they're doing their presentations and defenses of learning? So we're going to try and use these defenses to help us sort of understand these design principles, but also to help us consider how might a defense of learning be part of a larger system. Okay, that's the worst part, I promise, of all the framing. So we're going to talk about defenses of learning now, okay? And just kind of have fuzzy in the back of your mind. I care about how this relates to the design principles because I want to learn how we're going to design this system. But right now, I'm just going to focus in on defenses of learning. So we have a little definition here provided by the Learner-Centered Collaborative about just what even is a defense of learning. A defense of learning is a way for a student to share a portfolio or a specific product and reflect on how they achieved the intended learning outcomes. A committee of peers, teachers, family, and/or community members provide feedback and determine if the student met learning outcomes. This experience mimics real-life situations like work presentations and provides an authentic deadline and audience leading to higher quality work. That's what a defense of learning is. In a local context, like at a district, like Shelby County, who we're going to hear from a little bit later today, a district could decide that as part of a balanced system of assessment, they want to use defenses of learning for all the reasons that were in that definition. It provides a meaningful audience. It motivates good work. Back to the quote from the teacher before, it causes kids to pause and notice what on earth are they learning and not just worry about checking boxes, but actually be attentive to real deep learning. There are lots of good reasons to do them. They're great community building events. If you've been to defenses of learning before, community members who come and witness what kids can do are perpetually impressed. They've forgotten how capable they were when they were 10 years old. And it's great to see other kids remind them of that. They're powerful community building experiences. There's lots of reasons you might do it, but one of them is they can actually do a good job of assessing a certain thing. Like I said, they're pretty good at assessing the competencies in a graduate profile. And it's hard to assess those in other ways. There are better ways to assess my math fluency. You should not ask me to do a defense, probably. It's like a really inefficient way that doesn't give you much breadth of information about my math fluency, but it's great at telling you, learning something about how well I collaborate, because I can really tell you a story about that and show you evidence of feedback from my peers about the way I participated, right? So it's a good fit for some things. It's a component of a local balanced system of assessment. And they can be designed and implemented to align with our design principles. They can also be designed and implemented to align with a variety of different local priorities, and we're going to see some examples of that in just a little bit. So pausing before we go into the videos, it's about to get exciting. We're about to see some defenses shared with us from Shelby County. Take just a moment at your tables and consider, like, where are you in terms of experience and depth of understanding of this assessment practice? If you think of a defense of learning as an assessment practice, how much experience have you had? Any amount of experience is fine. You could make a new level 0 that's like, man, this is the first time I've heard this word. That's fine too. But we just think for the discussions you're going to have at your tables, it's a good idea to just talk a little bit about everybody's current experience with it. So these are suggestions about how you might sort of identify your depth of knowledge. Also consider, like, you might have feelings about it, and those are good to share too. Like, oh man, I've been in these, I think they're magical. Or like, I don't know, we had this and it didn't go so hot in my district. That's okay too. Whatever your experiences and feelings are, share that too. We want to take just a few minutes at tables to just ground each other in like, what do I know about this? What's my experience been? How do I feel about this? Because you're going to have a number of rounds of discussion together. It feels important to get like sort of baseline about where you're starting from. All right, a few minutes. Excellent. Before we shift to our next part here, it seems plausible that as you were having these discussions, some question may have emerged for you. Or there's some topic that you're like, man, I'd like to know more about that, actually. So-and-so at my table said this thing, and it made me think this thing, and I have a question. There's chart paper being delivered by Magic right now. And by Magic, I mean by Karen. That is a place for you. You got Post-it notes. You always have Post-it notes on your tables. If you've got one such question that you're just like, hey, man, I got this question, write it down and stick it on your chart paper. This is for two reasons. One is it'll help you remember, like, oh, I have a question, which as we go through the rest of our learning about this might mean you're sharp about it and you find answers to it. The other is we're probably not going to answer everybody's questions in what we've planned that comes next. And we want to make time in the agenda for like a little bit of parking lot, discussion, which is when you have the parking lot discussion inside instead of in the parking lot. So if you have ideas that you want to come back to, put them on that Post-it note, and we're going to do some things to help organize discussions around topics that are in there and unsatisfied at the end of the day tomorrow. Okay? Moving forward, Sarah is going to introduce us to the illustrative example. I think we chose that word.
I don't know that I chose that word, but it certainly speaks to the experience. I would love to orient you for just a moment into your participant folders. You should have something that is titled an observation guide with plenty of space for you to jot down some thoughts throughout the next several minutes. Wonderful. Paper's fluttering. Make sure you have something to write with handy. So we are going to take some time and really in thinking about the experiences that we wanted members to have today, we wanted to root it in really the learners. As we engage as learners ourselves, wanting to take the experience as close to the kids, to the students as possible. And so when we talk about these practices, these systems, often we can get lost in the sauce. Karen Perry, I love that phrase. We can get lost in the sauce very easily and forget that there are kids involved in that very process. So how better to ground ourselves in these conversations and in this really important work today than by seeing kids be awesome. So we are so thankful that out of many, many districts across our state, as Gretchen mentioned, this is a trend. This is something, if you go out and see over 117 districts now across our state have invested in the creation of a local portrait of a learner, a local set of competencies that is of importance to their community. Out of those 117, they're digging into this work. They are thinking about the ways that students can showcase their learning, showcase their ability to apply that learning in authentic ways, and they are looking at ways to assess and ensure that those very valuable learning outcomes are indeed met. And so we're going to dive into this process together by exploring and learning from those students. There is the guide, as I mentioned, in your folders. And you'll notice that those questions are centered around really our focus theme of today, which are those student outcomes and student experiences. So rooting ourselves in that lens for this portion. Then we're going to break off into some small group discussion based on your thoughts and reflections and observations of the videos. And then we'll have time to share out some key insights to the full group. So as you get ready to watch, again, going to point you back to your observation guide. Please, please, please have your pens and pencils busy during these observations. Jot down, but focus just for some clarity for yourself. Pick one or two of those questions to focus on specifically. And think about how this learning experience is seen through the theme of prioritizing student experiences and outcomes. So today we're going to learn from a 5th grade student at Wright Elementary School, an 8th grade student at Marnell C. Mormon Middle School, and a 12th grade student from Shelby County High School. And I see our special guests from Shelby County have just come in. We'll learn from them after we hear from their amazing learners. But just want to lift up that actually, is it tomorrow? I've heard this process is going down again. So this is right now, right here. So thank you for your all's time as well.
Whenever you're ready.
Hello, my name is Adelaide Young. I'm a 5th grader at Wright Elementary, Mrs. Floyd's class, and this is my 5th grade learning defense. I will always be learning something new and applying it to the different places I go. This year, when we took math in the fall, my geometry area was my lowest area in math, and I really wanted to improve that score, so I took initiative and asked for joint box lessons and Khan Academy lessons about geometry. I took responsibility and completed those lessons, and the next time we took math, which was in the winter, my score went up and geometry was my highest area. My score showed that I took responsibility and initiative so that I could improve my scores. I know that I personally learn best with models, so when I do presentations, I always try to have a model along with it. Last year when we did our 5 sense projects, I did the eye. I had 3 different models showing the parts of the eye, how the eye works, and how the eye is connected with the brain. That helped me learn better, and I hope it helped other people learn better too. I will never stop learning because learning is something that is lifelong.
Hi, so hello, my name is Cynthia Lavario, and this is my 8th grade defense. And that's another picture of me and my mom. And then my 8th grade science poster. So I demonstrated mastery of skill because I really like, whenever I research a project, I like to really understand what my project is about. And so I did a lot of research, and it took a lot of time to do this. And I got a 4 on this project, and I was really happy on how I did. And I persisted through difficulties because on the back of this, we had to do a CRAP method. We had to use 2 sources and find if they were reliable or not. And I found out that some of my sources weren't as reliable as I thought they were, so I had to go back and change it and fix it. And then I also I saw opportunities where I could improve because I feel like the colors I used weren't the best colors, and I know I could have done better and used better colors. And something that would just really appeal to my audience and make it look better so that the audience would actually engage with it. So that's my presentation. Thank you for listening. Do you guys have any questions?
One thing I want to point out, you said in one of your competencies, you had the opportunity to fail. And I think a lot of the times we all, even me as an adult, look at failure as something that's negative. And so the fact that you were able to say, I had the opportunity to fail and know that it's not always a bad thing, and you were able to learn through that. I think I wrote that down on your sheet because that's just something as an adult I would not even think about. And so that shows how much you've grown.
You spoke a lot to the profile of a graduate. So can you talk to us about why those skills are so important and why we teach them in school?
Well, I think that learning these skills, especially early on, is so important. So once you become an adult, it's just easier to understand. It's easier to grasp the concepts and stuff. And I feel especially now in middle school, sometimes people struggle with that, and I feel I've also struggled with that. But I feel learning this early on will just help you have an open mindset and really understand and grow more as an adult than as you are now.
Alright, good afternoon. My name is Roger Loving. This is my senior defense. Alright, a little bit about me is I live with my dad, my brother, my mom, and my 2 dogs, Bella and Petey. I got a pit bull and a soy poodle. I played this year for football, Shelby County High School. I was a linebacker. I was also the running back. They switched me around a lot. I was flexible in the position they put me. In my free time, I like to play basketball, football. I like to skate, read, watch anime. I like shoes. I like collecting shoes a lot. I like to work out, listen to music. In this picture right here, me and my stepdad, we was at Hubert's Farm together. And I was born January 22nd. And yeah, I'm gonna just give a short description of what the Reading Gala. Y'all might already know what that is. The Reading Gala is you choose a book, and then your group is randomly selected, and you read the book, and you go in. They got a bunch of snacks. That really got me to go with the snacks. Yeah. And then you discuss the book, you ask questions, you talk about it, you want to hear everybody's opinion on what they thought. Good book, bad book. I thought it was a good book. But the POGs that I tied to this, I tied the POG critical thinker to this book. I think this book was like really good. At first I just chose it for the pictures, but after like really reflecting, I thought, hold on, this is like a really good book, because this my brother's husband. This has to do with homosexuality, and like I thought I had to think flexibly about what it was everybody's opinion on that. I had to ask myself questions like, hold on, is this going to offend anybody? Is this going to this? Is this going to that? I had to really be a critical thinker at this time. I had to analyze the outcomes also. I had to analyze the outcomes of what I was going to say, or how I was going to act, how I was going to react. My face expressions, anything I could have done could have offended somebody, and that's the last thing I think I wanted to do at that moment. And we obviously had to ask questions what we thought about the book. A couple questions were, when did you finish it? Because I know a lot of people, they finished it the night before, or they didn't read it, or this or that. But you'll learn later that I also want to do real estate later in the future. I want to take the course and then sell houses and apartments and all that fun stuff. So I think, how will this critical thinking help me in the future? Negotiating, I had to negotiate, ask questions. I had to negotiate question, asking and solving complex problems. What if like the people don't want to buy it, or somebody beats me to a house that I was about to sell? That was really good for me. I gotta like overcome adversity. This is what my coaches taught me.
All right, so just a sampling. Those are not the full student defenses, but we wanted to capture about 2 minutes per student just for you to think about and chew on a little bit. Hopefully you took a few notes on your observation sheet around 1 or 2 of the questions that were posed for you there to think about. And we're going to engage now in just a little bit of table talk. Oh, first of all, again, thank you to those students. While they're not here in the space with us, we wouldn't have had this experience without them and the wonderful organization that goes on behind the scenes to make those resources available not only to us, but to other folks across our state. So at your table, each of you should have selected about 1 or 2 things that you wanted to focus on as you viewed those student defenses. So we're going to take a moment at your table, think about the first thing that you would like to address in conversations. We're going to go around, each person kind of do a share out of your own reflections in that area. And then just kind of naturally and in that space as it takes you, go around again. What are some additional focus areas that you want to acknowledge in your conversation? And then as time allows, let's kind of lift up and highlight a key takeaway for you in seeing an example of a student defense. Or does that leave you with a question that you want to be sure to share with the whole group? And so just take notes of that as folks talk in the room. We'll lift up some key insights or pertinent questions as they arise in your discussions. Any questions about table talk? All right. We'll take some time here, watch the clock, give you some updates on how long we have, but go ahead and have some discussions around this experience with our students. Let's bring it all back together. Do you want to draw your attention? It was heard throughout the room. This is what we like. They're in it. They're in it. This is what will really be sparks in work groups later too. All right. I want to bring your attention to some new posters and papers that are now hanging around the room. They're slightly smaller, but it was heard around the room that some people just wanted more, wanted to listen to more students, wanted to witness more defenses. One of the things that Shelby County is really leading in our state is putting their work out there, being vulnerable enough to share iterations of their work. And so something that I often cling to and share myself is a Shelby County Portrait of a Graduate dashboard. And those are now hung up in 4 spaces around the room. They're colored standard printer size paper over there. But you'll see that this is a tool, a one-page tool that lays out each of their local competencies and then gives you a QR code actually to go to this full document that you can interact with later. But within each competency, they have student defenses at elementary, middle, and high school, just like you saw. They have an exemplar of that at each within each competency. And then you also get to see some of their sample rubrics. So what they use to give those students feedback on their outcomes and some additional information around their competencies, their indicators, and their outcomes. So just want to make sure that you know those resources are out there. If you want to scan the QR codes later today at the break, that will take you to that resource and you can explore even more. So let's do some share outs here from at least a few tables. Does anyone have an aha, a key insight, or maybe just a burning question that you want to surface for the room?
I just want to share something that Jennifer made me think of and realize is that when the young man was talking about his reaction to the book, it made me realize that I hold an idea about what a vibrant learning experience is that's a little bit like, it has to be a big project that, you know, is like flashy and kind of splashy. But actually what makes it really vibrant, and this is based on Jennifer's reflection, is that it's actually the metacognition about this learning and like the real grappling with what he was thinking and imagining and what he was anticipating was going to be attention in the discussion, and that it's a vibrant learning experience doesn't have to be like a big deal. It can be very like personal and very profound just for that one individual learner.
Thanks for sharing that, Donnie and Jennifer.
Along those same lines, the first girl talked about how she knew that she learned best through models. And I thought like that stuck out to me, like knowing that there's an awareness, especially at such a young age, to know how she learns. I thought that was cool. But one thing that we talked a lot about was we want to see a bad one. We want to see like when it doesn't work and what that looks like. You go, okay, good. That's one thing. And talking about like the buy-in, how do we build this out to our teachers to like in districts that are resistant to growing and some of these changes? So that's one thing I think we focused quite a bit on, those questions.
I'm not going to spoil any surprises, but they have a little bit of insight to what that looks like when it doesn't go so well. Oh, I'm sorry. I saw Kathy, I'm Travis.
Yeah, we just talked a little bit about sometimes when you focus on the profile, there's a lot of thought that you're leaving academic content standards, and if you paid attention, while it wasn't necessarily called out, there was academic content and learning there, and so we just talked a little bit about that at our table. And the question that we raised was, how do we, I think the word was used, keep from over-engineering things, right, or overcomplicating a process like this?
Thank you for sharing that. Kathy, still no question? Okay. One more, anyone? Getting exercise in today, thank you.
Hello, so my name is Shelly, and I just did all this yesterday at my kids' high school. I was invited as a community member. Actually, I kind of invited myself. It's a long story. But I see the value in this. And my kind of question that I'll pose too is, how do we get more people involved in this and then share this with others? Like, there's some powerful learning. And as a parent, I left my kids' school thinking, dang, this is good school. Like, we made a good choice. And all those naysayers and negatives were just like dwindled quickly. And there are some not so great presentations, but that's not because they're not great kids. They're just not great presenters, but they have great skills. So if you get a chance, invite yourself. Don't wait to be invited.
You might want to come to the Engaging with Communities work group.
Or you could learn more with local districts. If we're doing it, Karen, we're doing it. Thank you so much for, one, having those discussions, being such an attentive audience to those learners as they shared their own journeys. We are going to reward your hard work and dedication in those conversations with a well-deserved 15-minute break. Don't go too far, because we are so excited to bring in our guest and have them give you a little peek behind the curtain of what goes into making those experiences possible. So we'll see you back here. Before I let you go, don't think it's all relaxing, because this is a great opportunity to take a bio break, take care of yourself, but also just fill yourselves with even more knowledge and understanding. So just a reminder, we have all these resources around the room. Please, please, please take advantage if you find yourself with a moment to spare. So hopefully you had a moment to take care of yourself and anything else in your world that's going on outside of this room today. Wanted to transition now, as you've had a chance to learn from our youth learners, to now think about this through the lens of the adults in those systems who are responsible for making it all possible, right? We know that there are systems, structures, and experiences that are being designed, refined behind the scenes, and that's what makes this a successful experience at the local level. So just want to lift up for you right now a consideration that defenses, as we've mentioned now a few times, really are happening and emerging in different communities at different paces all across the state. Not everyone is engaged in this process. Many, many are, and they're all at different stages of this work. And so as they're developing at the local level, want you to keep in your mind that each community is engaging with this same process in many different ways. Want to offer up just an alternative to the Shelby County approach. We have Frankfort Independent Schools just a few miles from here. They too have designed a local defense structure for their students, but it looks a little bit different, right? Same practice, but in their local context, it currently exists with 11th and 12th graders and is a little bit more focused towards an internship experience that they get at the high school level. So still around their local portrait, different competencies, similar process, but just with a few differences. So I want to keep that in mind, that we're talking about some apples here today, but much as the image on the screen suggests, those apples look a little bit different from one another, have a little bit of a different flavor, depending on what community you might see it in. So, also want to bring you back to a connection that we're exploring today through this work. Gretchen reintroduced you earlier to the design principles that have come so far as learnings from the Accelerating Innovation Committee. And so want to explore this defense process as a part of not an exhaustive list by any means. This is one practice within local and state assessment systems that we're exploring together and that we're considering. So in a local balanced assessment system, there are a lot of decisions that are being made by the folks who are sitting here and by many of folks who are still in their districts preparing for tomorrow's defenses. So they're deciding who is included. What are the processes around this? Who are the audience members and panelists for our students? What do the evaluation processes look like for our local context and districts as well? And so if we want to consider today in our conversations the implications of what this could look like, both at the local accountability level and what we need to learn if it is to be considered at some sort of state level, what do we want to think about through the lens of the design principles to make that happen? And so think of our design principles as a sort of filter, right? There are levels of this at the local level that need to be considered, design parameters that these folks are operating within. And then we need to look critically at those design principles as well to think about the considerations, be it for what we hope to see in our accountability system. Gretchen, Andre, anything to add there? All right. So orienting us again back into this scope of our design, what Gretchen mentioned earlier kind of took us into the level of the essential features, perhaps a menu of options that we want to prototype and think about as we get closer to an accountability system. And so think about defenses as one of those potential operational components, as a mechanism to implement some of the specific features of that system in which we design. So why are these fantastic folks in front of us today? We hope to look behind the curtain, knowing that this doesn't happen overnight by any means. This has been a long, long, hard journey, as I'm sure they'll speak to, and look at some of the design choices that they've made locally. What are they thinking about? What are they having to consider that's unique to their context to make the system work for them? And then seeing this helps us better address some system level questions. So as they are sharing, think about with your KUWL Council hats on and the various perspectives that you come here representing, how can our state allow for local communities to design these local defense systems or other aspects of a balanced system in a way that works for them, but still allows the state to learn something important about those schools and their district's performance. So we're excited today to have Adam Hicks. Dr. Adam Hicks serves as the Chief Academic Officer in Shelby County. Adam, if you'll just let folks know who you are. Julie Webb comes to us from Shelby County High School as the Library Media Specialist and coordinator of their school's Portrait of a Learner efforts. Artavia Ackland, West Middle School Principal in Shelby County, and JJ Black, Principal at Heritage Elementary Schools. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. My papers are over here, so I apologize. We're gonna just kind of engage with our Shelby County friends today, kind of panel style. There is a mic, if you all don't mind to share between you all, and just answering some questions here. So Adam, I'm gonna start with you. If you don't mind to share with us, in what ways do Shelby County's district structures and systems ensure that students have equitable opportunities to both collect artifacts of their learning over time and defend their learning?
So there are a lot of steps that we've taken over the years that I think would have really benefited our students and our district. We've taken a very systemic approach from the policy end. So our school board has a board policy that requires all 12th grade students to complete a defensive learning as a graduation requirement. We're looking to now scale that up, hopefully, to 5th and 8th grade and rewrite that policy to say transitional defenses, just to add some permanence to the structure that we've built. The other structure that has been immensely helpful is we have 2 days in our calendar where it is not a traditional day for students. In the past, we've called them personalized learning days, where students can come in for small group remediation or intervention or enrichment. This year, we set the district expectation that all defenses of learning needed to take place on the 2 personalized learning days in March and in April. So next year, with our calendar, our school calendar, we're just going to simply call them what they are. So next year, we are going to have 3 defensive learning days that are going to be embedded, that have been approved by our board in our school calendar. So not only now will we have 3 days where our schools will have the flexibility to allow students to defend their learning, but then we'll also have time for school-based grade level exhibitions. A lot of the feedback that we've received from our teachers, students, and community is they really like having those during the day opportunities. Some of the other systemic pieces that have been really critical for us, Sarah shared with you all, and it's around the room, the profile of a graduate dashboard. So we've created an exemplar of video databases where at every level, 5th, 8th, and 12th, we have recorded students who have exemplified the profile of a graduate and successfully defended their learning. We then have our rubrics that we are constantly revising. And then we use those tools annually to ensure, especially in this environment where there's obviously a lot of turnover in education. We have a lot of new folks who are joining the Shelby County team. That structure allows the permanence of what we've built to continue past, the unfortunate day that Julie retires next year. So that, in a good way, after Julie's 90 days up, because I know I'm in KDE, I'm not going to say she's not going to come back before then, but once Julie's 90 days up, then Julie can come back as a participant and, continue to build the structure that we've put into place. Yeah, I think that was it as far as my notes go.
If I could build onto that a little bit, and I heard it even just during the break, and Julie, you may even, I know you have a pretty robust system at Shelby County High School for this. We know from members and folks in general who are exploring these local systems design at the state level, it's especially important that we're giving students the support they need to be successful. And that means every single student, any type of background, every learning ability and need that they have. And then there's cultural and linguistic considerations to be had as well. So how are students given the opportunity at Shelby County High School or in any Shelby County school to work with adults, supportive spaces that really equips them well to get them to these defenses?
We are, I think, in year 5 of advisory. And so the way we structure it at Shelby County High School is students are it's pretty randomly assigned to an advisor for the year. And we meet for 25 minutes every day. And we have it's kind of a balance between a loose and a tight structure for a curriculum for advisory with regards to these are some things that you need to cover with 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. And it consists of keys money and GPA, understanding what GPAs are. It might be guest speakers. It's college scholarship support. All kinds of things happen in advisory, but it's very systemic so that in January for our 12th grade advisories, that's when we really start to focus on our senior defenses. Every grade level, however, has an end of year product that they have to complete. And it was decided, I think 5 years ago, that students got a half credit for their advisory work. And that is in large part based on an end of year product, which scaffolds to their senior defense. So it's an informal presentation. I think sophomores do a lot of career research. Juniors start their working resumes. And then obviously seniors are working on their senior defenses. So for 25 minutes every day, which is not enough time to get the defense finished in just that setting, but for 25 minutes, they're touching base and getting feedback and, learning what time they have to be here tomorrow. Every day in advisory. So that's school-wide for every single student. Literally every single student in our building goes to an advisory every day.
I think the same goes for JJ and I. I come from an elementary background, so I was an elementary principal for 8 years, and for whatever reason, I just thought the Lord was telling me I need to go to middle school. Oh no. Who knows? But we even started as low as kindergarten. Like every student in the building does what we call an exhibition of learning, which gets them prepared and ready for the official defense at the end of 5th grade or 8th grade. And so for me, my MSD unit, those kids did exhibitions. Their parents came in, community members came in, kindergarten students do them. So it's not something that only certain students do. Even if I have to exhibit my learning by touching a button and something is speaking for me, or I'm using pictures to show what I've learned, everybody does one. So I think that's something important to know and have the background as to how we start. Kindergarten, did you just do kindergarten exhibitions? I'm gonna let you speak to that just for a minute.
So just today, this morning at 8, we had kindergarten exhibitions at Heritage. So even you have to start that young. And they had 3 responsibilities today. Their focus was effective communicator, and they had to make eye contact. They had to speak loudly and clearly because they were in a gym. 75 students were presenting to come to guests. And so they had to speak loudly and clearly. And then they had to tell about their community helper. They were roles of community helpers, and they had a folder where they had written sentences and had their tools. And so they had to do that today. And they were assessed by assessors within our building, but they also presented to strangers, to people throughout. So a 6-year-old is presenting, and there were about 100 guests in the building at that time. And it takes about 30 to 45 minutes. So the key is that we start that early. And I had a unique opportunity today to get to say to my parents in the gym, when I brought your student in August, you probably had no thought that today your child would be able to do what he or she did. And they were great. They were so cute and so great. But I also got to tell them, tomorrow I get to go watch my senior defend her learning. And so what she will do tomorrow started today for your child. And so that effect that I got to have this morning, that I personally got to have, was something I got to share with our community. And the community is a huge part of this success. I know you all have questions about that. It is big to be successful.
I'm so glad you said that, JJ, and for sharing. So, and I know a little bit because we've been on this journey just for a moment in this time, and really with you as a local laboratory of learning district and community. And Shelby County was a little unique in that process because when you listen to members through empathy interviews, I know that it quickly arose that there was this need for community learning and community beyond just the engagement, right? How do we engage, but how do we help our community members get involved and understand this process? And so welcome any of you to also speak to the fact that how do you get school communities to engage in this process with you, and how have you helped grow their understanding of the process?
Yeah, absolutely. So that has been the targeted focus of our L3 group over the past 2 years. I'm going to connect a previous point, hopefully, to this one, just because I really want to make sure, because I'm really proud of our district and our kids. So when we say that every single student in Shelby County Public Schools defends their learning, we truly mean every single student. Tomorrow, we have students in complex needs units who are going to defend their learning. 25% of Shelby County Public School students are Hispanic. 13% of our students are English language learners. Every single child is given the opportunity to defend in their native language with a native speaker that, Julie and her team at Shelby County High School, for example, work tirelessly to coordinate. So connected to your question, that has been a great turning point for our district. Realizing that from the linguistic perspective, that when we have some students who have been in Shelby County and in America for maybe less than a month, and the 5th grade, they're still going to defend. Their parents are invited to come with them. We bring our EL team for supports. From the larger community scale end, we have restructured our high school defenses around job pathways. Last year, we're very fortunate. We have a lot of industry in Shelby County. Our local hospital, University of Louisville, has an extension office in Shelby County. And their executive actually came to several student defenses and offered kids jobs on the spot. And so we've had kids who are in our career and technical education pathways who have invited their bosses in to listen to their defenses. So in a great way, we've really put an intentional focus on community involvement, but that's been a learning process for us too. So we, as educators, we're like, oh, there's got to be a rubric for everything. When they come in, they're going to score this, they're going to do that. And then sometimes we forget that all a community person really needs is a set of questions and the comfort to know that their voice matters from the perspective of a kiddo. So that's been one of the really integral focuses to some of the revisions that we've done. Every single one of these. So again, Julie, Shelby County High School, their defenses are taking place tomorrow. Artavia at West has some tomorrow as well. We have a district community liaison who coordinates all of those efforts for our team. So Kelly McNew is her name. We have lined up about 60 or so community partners who will be in every single Shelby County Public School tomorrow to sit in on defenses.
Thank you, Adam. So we've talked a lot from the student experience, and I know you all are here to share both district and school leader perspective. The teachers also sit at the heart of a lot of this work. And this is different, as we often always acknowledge, from their experiences, both in teacher prep programs and the way that we've just experienced school historically. So what types of supports have you all built processes for the professional learning of your educators to perhaps get buy-in, to get their perspectives on the experience along the way in this process?
That kind of goes along with one of the challenges that we face is turnover in every school. And we had a pretty steady, solid team at Shelby County through the development process. And then we had a lot of turnover last year. We had a lot of staff turnover. We had some administrative turnover. And so that was very eye-opening as we started this work this year. And I'm like, oh my gosh, our principal doesn't even know what to do. And so we have the way we provide support for our staff is we provide training at the very beginning of the year. As part of the, August PD is we talk about advisory. We, in the past, have had one of our monthly faculty meetings is an advisory PLC. We have our advisories broken into grade levels, and every grade level has a grade level leader who can provide support to teachers just on a daily basis, or if you need somebody to go ask questions. We give students and staff surveys twice a year just to get some feedback about, do they feel supported? Do kids feel like they're getting what they need? We have a success criteria for advisory so that kids know what advisory should look like and adults know what advisory should look like, so that we can get some feedback about what's happening across the board, because it's, we have basic expectations in advisory that you'll communicate information to students and that you will follow our tights. Other than that, there's a lot of leeway. And so there's a little bit of advisory envy every year. Everybody wants Mr. Page's advisory because he's cool and fun, and nobody wants Ms. Webb's because she's going to make you work really hard and she's a little extra. And that's just the reality of it. And I think that will always be the case. But we have basic expectations. This has to happen in advisory. And then after that, we have leeway. We try to provide monthly check-ins, monthly support. We do surveys, things like that, to try to bring people on board. But it has been challenging this year in particular. It has been difficult to just make sure that all information gets communicated well to all stakeholders.
So I'm elementary, and I'm on the opposite end of that, where our advisory is based around your homeroom, your core class. So the problem that happens in elementaries, this question to me lends to a lot of our growth, like where we have growth. And so the problem we were having was it becomes a fifth grade thing because defense is done in fifth grade. And so the first step to that is exposure of exhibitions. Exhibitions happen K all the way through fifth grade. That starts setting the standard of understanding the work of the profile. So we have to start with, what is the profile in kid language? Do kids understand what the profile means? And how is the profile not something extra? How is it a part of everything we do every single day? So this year we implemented a POG learning target. So kids, before they start doing any kind of work in the class, you have your normal learning target. But what areas of the profile am I going to be using in this lesson today? If I'm doing group work, we're going to probably be talking about collaborator. What does that look like? What does a responsible collaborator look like? And so they have to name that. So that makes the profile becoming a living, breathing part of everything they do every single day. Then, as we start shifting towards spring and defenses are coming up, you still have kindergarten teachers, first grade teachers, second grade teachers that really aren't in that defense mode. So this year, what we did is in our February personalized learning day, we had a practice run, and every teacher was partnered with no more than 2 fifth grade students where they could dig in and do defense work together to help the school own defenses. Then when it came March and it was time, we do a very, very planned, organized, procedural way of teaching. This is step by step what you're going to experience in the next week with the defenses, to train teachers on how do you score, how do you ask questions, how do you give feedback to kids. But we just spend a lot of time coaching teachers through that. Our 5th grade team is a big part of that and what they'll see. And then right before defenses, every child in our school has to go through an admin team and present to admin team, where they get very, very specific coaching. And so the kids then are buying into it. So it's just everybody is involved in the process.
Well, Artavia, if you don't mind, maybe to add in then around, we've heard from other district leaders, specifically as L3s. One in particular commented that we never hope someone looks at this process as less rigorous. This is something that is demanding of students, staff, and even community members and families. So at your middle school level, Artavia, how do your teachers and your staff ensure that this is a rigorous experience for every student? And I think earlier I want to lift up a comment, a point of concern where some folks see the balance of academic content and the competencies. What does that look like for students at your school?
I think it's important to note that it goes hand in hand. So just for example, you have a situation where you're in a math workshop. So the workshop starts with your crafting lesson, you have your composing, and then there's that general reflection. But the general reflection comes with, okay, what competency did I apply during math? So if I am working in a group project, okay, obviously it's collaboration, but also that math content is dealing towards some type of critical thinking. So they really have to think about which competency did I apply during this math workshop or during this science workshop. And it's making the connection that this is not one more thing. They go hand in hand. So you have your content that is driven every day, but this is a layered piece where they're intertwined. And so it pushes the rigor actually. Coming from a parent, we all have students that are in the district. And I was sharing with Susan Dougal this morning, when I think about my youngest, who is a 6th grade student, he applies himself more when he knows, okay, I have to do this presentation. I have to bring in the content. I have to figure out which competency applies to artifacts. And so I won't say it's more stressful, but I think he pushes himself more because I'm not taking paper pencil. I'm not just going to bubble in. There are going to be people that are going to give me feedback. And so therefore it's almost more pride in the work. Yeah, so much more intrinsic. I have a senior who's defending tomorrow and all week, mama, listen, mama, slow down, just slow down. And so I think it's that piece of, yeah, the academic piece, the content piece is easy. I know my content. I need to make sure that other people see my content by way of the competencies in my presentation skills. So you can't separate them, because if you don't have one, you don't have the other.
It's from the district seat, and this is something that we've talked about with a lot of our principals. This is an and, it's not an or, right? It is not this is a complete replacement of traditional assessments. This is an and, this is a value added. Going back again to our demographics, I mean, it has been I mentioned this, Artavia, every time you and I are together, when you were principal at Paint and Stone Elementary, like you and I were walking out of there in tears when your complex needs unit had their defensive learning, where students who were completely nonverbal were using their assistive technology to present to their families. I mean, truly there wasn't a dry eye in the house. But when we think about, and again, our English language learners and our very prominent and involved Hispanic community in Shelby County, this for us has been allowed to give them the and to allow them to see, to allow our staff to see that, you know, our child is more than a MAP score, than a Kentucky Summative Assessment score, and it's just become so ingrained. And we want that, Artavia mentioned, we want that for our personal children. All 4 of us up here are Shelby County residents. Julie's, well, actually, Julie's daughter, I taught a bajillion years ago now. She works for the district, but these 2 proud moms, their daughters are defending their learning tomorrow. So, you know, we also have that personal investment of, we want every person in our community to understand, to the assessment lens, is that this is not a replacement of, it's an and. This is an extra value added where students of any ability level are given the opportunity to shine.
Way to tap into all modalities.
I have just 2 more questions for you, and want to feed off a little bit, Adam, of what you just said there. First, as having been a witness to, and thankful to have been a panelist before in Shelby to experience some of these, if you leave with a dry eye, you're not doing something right, because you hear stories from the students. And I think we saw a little bit of that. Students, I love the fact that every student like introduced themselves as a human. Can you talk a little bit more about the structures you've put in place to provide students that space to showcase who they are? And then kind of a secondary question, how you're connecting them more to authentic learning experiences based on knowing that about them.
Part of our, I think this answers your question. If it doesn't, tell me. We do require students, at least a minimum of 1 artifact has to be academic. And we define academic as anything that happens in the school building. So it's not just those core classes. It is art, it is band, it is what you do down in your diesel class. Anything that they complete at school is what we consider academic. The other artifacts that students bring in are their club experiences, their co-op experiences. We'll see how it goes. I have 2 boys defending tomorrow about working on their trucks. And there's true critical thinking that they do, and they learned things at the ATC that they're applying there. Whether they pull it off, I guess will remain to be seen. But they were like, wait, I can talk about my truck? And I'm like, yes, you can talk about your truck. And we talked about what that evidence looks like. And so we'll see how that goes. But I work with some of these kids every single day. And tomorrow I will learn something about some of those kids that I didn't know. When they stand up and they say, a kid told me yesterday, and I'm a skateboarder. I'm like, what? When do you? Yeah, I just had no idea. You learn about these kids and who they are. And it just adds so much value to your experience as an educator when you know these things about them. And you figure out, to Adam's point, that they are so much more than these tests that they have to take. And so we try to add value to those things by allowing them to bring in their personal experiences and then asking them to connect. How does the persuasive essay you wrote in junior English where you thought critically, how does that help you work on your truck? You have to ask questions. Don't you analyze outcomes when you turn that key and it doesn't work? Aren't you analyzing an outcome? They're like, oh yeah. And that is just where the magic starts to happen, when they start to do that on their own. So we allow them to bring in all those outside things, and then we did notice that CTE classes kill it every year in defenses. Kill it. But then we were like, but what about that persuasive essay? What about that work you did in your math class? And so we started collecting data last year on core content artifacts, just to see. We're like, I wonder where their companies, where their artifacts are coming from. And so part of our when we enter our Google form is sports, English, science, clubs, church, whatever. We started collecting that data so that we could look at it and see, and maybe intentionally start working in our core classes to help students. They are thinking critically, they just don't know it. They know CPR is critical thinking, but is writing this essay critical thinking? And so helping them connect those dots has been really, really helpful.
Julie, do you mind so one of the other components, Sarah, to that question is we've set pretty high expectations, especially at the 12th grade level, for what a successful defense looks like. So someone made the joke earlier about like, what about the unsuccessful ones? I don't want to steal too much of your thunder, but actually, yeah. But one of the videos that we just saw was an interesting illustration for this group, I think, of the power of the process.
The senior defense that you guys saw was a resubmit. And I didn't realize it until I think night before last. I was like, I wonder what video they're going to watch. And when I clicked on, I was like, oh my gosh, this was his second try. And he did really well. He knew he didn't do well. It was no surprise to him or anybody else after his defense that it did not even meet expectations. So when he did that his second time, what you didn't see at the very end, he had saved his feedback from his first time around. And when he said, do you all have any questions? We asked him a question, and then he's like, is that it? And we're like, yeah. And he said, well, here's the questions that they asked me the first time around that I didn't know the answers to. And he saved those, and he answered all of those questions as well. So we are not checking a box. We have a minimum expectation for every student. We already have our resubmit day set. My advisor is seeing that same video you all saw today so that they know that this kid resubmitted and he survived. He, had to do it, and he lived to tell the tale. It was okay, and he did really well. So I was kind of proud that you guys got to see that because that was his second try.
So just in closing, I haven't prepped you all with this question at all, so I apologize. But I do want to give you all space as our guests here today, just to kind of come down the line, if you will, and share what would you hate to leave here not having shared of this experience with these KUWL Council members, knowing that they're looking to learn from you about how they can take these really promising local practices and make it meaningful at the state level. What would just be your takeaway for these folks to consider about this work?
So one piece that I just would really like to continue to emphasize is that it's really built on a set of tights and looses. We, over time in Shelby County, have thought about, do we mandate the type of presentation that is given? Is one of our tights saying that every school has to create a website? But part of, I think, that our success from a systemic standpoint is that even our district tights are still fairly loose in nature. It is very 30,000 foot. You have to defend 5th, 8th, and 12th grade. We name the number of competencies that a student has to defend, and then we make an academic connection in those defenses. And then other than that, we don't want to stifle the creativity of our students, because that's what makes it special, right? When this becomes too factory-esque is when it falls flat. Part of the joy in seeing the resubmits and seeing the complex needs units is because the students and the teachers have the creativity and freedom to tie in diesel mechanics and assistive technology to their presentations.
I would say just jump. I'm a big believer in that. I'm also a big believer in where you set the bar is where your kids will rise. And I believe in setting a bar super duper high, and just jump. You're going to fail forward. And that's the advice I would probably want everyone to hear, is that you're not going to be any worse than you were yesterday, but you will be better. You just might not be courageous enough to do it. But I promise, I tell my teachers, I've got a rope around your waist. You can jump off that cliff right now, but you're not going to fall. I've got you, and we'll figure it out together, but just jump. And that's what I think Shelby County did, was when they said, we're just going to all do it. And Artavia and I were together when we started that, and we just jumped. And it was kind of scary, but we did it. And look where we are now. And give yourself time. Time. Great.
Okay, all transparency here. When we first started and they said jump, I was like, what in the world are we doing? Like, we are the blind leading the blind. What is really going on here? But I think the most important thing that I saw was the equity in a process like this. For my EL students, I was, at the time I was 27% EL. Now I'm like, 19 at the middle school, and it's still, everybody has the opportunity to show their learning. And it's not, your tag students, it's not, just your, regular ed students. everybody gets the opportunity to show what they know and to feel good about it. You have students that to take just a paper pencil test and not do well. Like my 6th grader, he is not the strongest at your normal summative traditional test, but baby, he's going to knock this out of the water just because everything that this involves speaks to different modalities and speaks to his learning, and he can bring connections in from outside of content to tie them to content. And so for somebody like him, which he mirrors a lot of our students in Shelby County, this works. I have a part of my day when I feel, or part of my school year when I feel successful, because it's just not one way. I'm exposed to several different ways to show my learning. And so if I could just say one thing, just, like JJ said, just jump. Know you have to go slow to go fast. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. And just be willing to fail, but you got to get back up.
Just to reiterate that, to stay the course and make up your mind you're going to do it, because sometimes we laugh like other people really want to see this, because it feels in a day-to-day it feels messy sometimes, and some days it's like, what are we doing here? But when you start to look at the body of work is when you start to see the value in it. And so day to day it feels very messy. We just kind of have committed to the mess and kind of staying the course. And at the end, when you look at the body of work is when you start to see the value, because sometimes day in and day out it feels like this is not working, this is hard, they're not getting it, what are we, and then you start to see the body of work over the years at the end of the year, and it's like, okay, this is, look at what we did, and it's really a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Thank you all so much. First, just want to give them just some appreciation and love in the room for sharing their experience. And as they've provided us with so much incredible lived experience, perspective around their local efforts, I want to pose to you just 3 reflection questions. And as they've all expressed, they are pulled away as of 8 a.m. this morning talking to all of her families. This is happening right now in their schools. But if they'll hang in there with us for just a few more moments, I want to give them a chance to respond and just get some reflections here from you all. So at your tables, just take some time here to digest this together. How did Shelby County design their defenses of learning to align with their views of vibrant learning experiences? What information is Shelby County lifting up and sharing with a broader public from their defenses of learning, and how are they doing that? And then what does this information convey about how students are developing competencies from their local portrait of a learner? And please don't feel confined by these questions. They're simply kind of a start for your discussion if you need them. But just take some time here, and then I'm going to pass the torch to Andre after I've taken so much of his time here to just kind of lift up some of the comments from tables, give our folks here from Shelby County time to respond in any way and make some connections back to design principles. So we'll give you, Karen, how are we doing on time? Okay. So let's take about 10 minutes here to discuss, and then we'll take about another 10 to engage together. If you all don't mind to make your way back to the front to respond to some of our reflections. I'll do a brief transition here and then pass things over to Andre to really lead some conversation or reflection specific to the design principles in terms of assessment and accountability. Really fruitful conversations. I'm so appreciative of just the opportunity to pick the brains of folks who are on the ground doing this work every single day to support their learners. Want to kind of give space here for you, again, to share out some big ahas, some big takeaways, or burning, lingering questions that you have for these folks while we have them, just to provide a response or any clarifying information. takeaways, questions, comments?
One thing that's really clear is that the system you have is really good at validating and celebrating student learning and the journey they took. What our conversation we were talking about was one other function of an accountability system is to figure out how to support people who aren't yet meeting the standard and to allocate resources and support to those who need it the most. And we wondered whether, like, how that plays out, especially maybe from your point of view, Adam, because that has implications for how a state system would be designed around things like this, because the state has to do the same thing with districts and with schools within districts. And so that's just something that's burning as a question at this table.
So that's a really good question. And frankly, that goes back to the structure I mentioned that's around the room with the exemplar, the video databases. We realized that in order to not only celebrate students, but make this a sustainable system for our district, that we had to name the high expectation, show the exemplars, and then have a rubric that would align directly to those experiences that we've seen. I'm former high school English teacher. I remember the portfolio days, but in a great way, that was the essence of what the old portfolio system did, was set a range of exemplars, set a high expectation, but then show some variance in the types of examples that are used. And it also then just goes back to that systems of tights and looses that we discussed at the district level. So here are the non-negotiables, but then here's the freedom that you have. And so by giving our schools not an overly rigid set of expectations, but one where they can see themselves in it, that trickles down to students as well. So the student that Julie mentioned earlier who had to resubmit, right? It is then that is a reteaching moment for the child, just like any academic remediation with, let's watch this exemplar together. What could you have done differently? The advisory structure that all of our schools use is another way to positively and proactively address areas of need, before the test, in the case of our defense, but also afterward if there's some additional supports necessary.
I want to add to the nitty gritty part of that. So like in the trenches answer. So you have kids who have IEPs or kids who can't, or we call them turtles lovingly, that just won't get stuff accomplished. So that's going to happen in this situation. And you're going to have some rock stars who will go out and they create whatever they're creating, and they're great. They need little to no. They're the racehorse and they're gone. But then you have your turtles that may have IEPs or may not. And so then we bring in extra support systems. It is an all hands on deck for us. And so the advisor might be working with them, or for me, the homeroom teacher. But then when I see a student is struggling and there are only so many hours in a day, then we bring in extra people. Maybe my essential arts are helping me do it. Maybe an instructional assistant is coming to help. Maybe admin's coming in to add a little boost of confidence and speed. Or if it's an IEP that needs a scribe, maybe we're typing for that student and helping them type because they literally have trouble typing it out. So then we give them their accommodations and help with that. So that's more of a nitty-gritty type of answer, but I think there was a lot of a conversation about what are you doing about the kids with special needs, and they are all addressed and the accommodations are all there, but the expectation is not lessened because of a disability. They are held to the same standard as everybody else. We just give them what they need to reach the same standard.
Let's aim for 2 more, either question, takeaway.
Probably got 6 or 7, but I'll just ask one. We're seeing a lot, an increased number of alternative and emergency certified teachers, and I suspect our teacher prep programs probably don't address this. You mentioned a little bit, what kind of supports are you giving to your first year teachers, your second year teachers to really help them get ingrained in this and get and buy into this?
Instructional coaches help a lot. PLC meetings within a department can help a lot. Co-teaching. with the librarian in my case. I've always liked to get invited into a classroom. Um, our core staff that's been there a while, they have built-in reflections in units and things that they use, and you know, you just have to, it's like everything else with teaching, they have to bring people along with them. But it's hard. Instructional coaches play a big role in it because they know what the expectations are, and they're really meeting with those new teachers, those alternative certified teachers, and they're deep in this work as well, and so they're super helpful. But it takes time. It takes, and you lose a teacher to a different district or a different career that had the best work, and then you replace them with somebody who's never done this before, and you've just almost like this artifact that kids were counting on has just disappeared, and you've got to rebuild that.
So we work in our onboarding for any new hire. We have a day and a half new teacher retreat, and so this past year we had a very similar process, frankly, to what you all just did here, where we show defenses of 5th, 8th, and 12th grade students to our new hires. They do turning, talking, and so we try from the district level to, number one, set the expectation for everyone coming in, like this is what our students are capable of. But then, I've mentioned this a couple times already, it just goes back on reliance on the structures and systems that we've built. So they come into the district knowing that this is the expectation. We have advisory structures for supports. We have built-in days in the calendar where they know that the defense is coming. And then we have the video exemplars in our rubrics just to truly show them and allow them to get there. But I really appreciate that question because I know that that's one that we've all struggled with.
All right, Karen.
Come to you, Kathy. I've been waiting to. My question is related, just listening to you talk, I really appreciate this. It's really expanded my mind and my way of thinking about defenses of learning. And thinking, the thing that I'll take away is how inclusive you are. But one of the questions I have is related, well, two. One is senior prep. What does that look like throughout their senior year in terms of preparing? But even greater question is parent prep. You talked about kindergartners and 3rd and 4th graders and 8th graders. And how are you prepping parents to understand where you're going and how this leads to their future of their children before they come and sit and watch them do these things?
So before I hand it off to the real experts who can answer that question, one additional piece I want to say about the great thing about how long we have been doing this is that, this is being from a parent of how old are my kids? It's terrible. 3rd grade, 2nd grade, kindergarten, that we know because of the exhibitions that have gone on from a parent's end, like it is just ingrained in who we are. Next year, we're fortunate that every 8th grade student will have done a 5th grade defense, and every senior will have done an 8th grade defense. So over time, we have built that expectation, but to the specific day today, each of these schools have a very specific process that they've used to like onboard parents and to include those in them. So.
Yeah. And I think one of the most important things to remember is that it doesn't just happen at school. So there's some conferring at home. There's some let me practice at home, and that's done by teachers sharing those expectations through newsletters or through emails or what have you. Look, we're in the thick of it, and we need your help. They need some conferring. They need some feedback, and so we involve parents that way. But as Dr. Hicks said, we start early. So in kindergarten, you know that your little one is doing an exhibition of learning, and so here's the feedback. In elementary, when you come in, you not only give your own child feedback, we used to ask that you make sure that you go touch base with 2 other students in the gym to give them feedback. So we're involving parents so they know early on that this is what we're doing. Everybody's exposed to the profile. It's on everything we do. It's all over the district. You know, it's in community, it's out in businesses. And so that's one way of just kind of getting it out there and letting people know it's just not done in the school for the 4 walls of the school. So.
All right, I am gonna pass it over.
Turn it off.
It is not planned that way, Andre.
I get the message.
Rhea, yes. Need some transition music as you walk around the room.
Thank you. So I am super excited about authentic learning, and I'm super excited about students being able to show what they know and all the things. And I don't think that I've met many teachers who are not about doing what's best for kids.
I think I agree 100% with that. I want to kind of go back on something Artavia said earlier. The reason this is working for us is when we say and, we don't mean an additional thing. It is a marriage of the competencies and the standards, the core academic standards are married. The standards are like, that is the what we do in life. The competencies are how we accomplish it. It's like how you, I think about transference. So I can do 5 times 4 is 20, but when I transfer it and explain to you that I was told I had to have 10 bushels of apples and they had this, that becomes the competency part of it. And so it's not about an extra. It's just about marrying them so that you can highlight the how, because some kids are not good at showing the what. The non-test takers, they're not good, but they can show you the how all day long, which is what Artavia was talking about with her son. And I understand because my daughter's a CTE kid. So she can talk to you about welding and all that stuff all day long, but she does not want to talk to you about the math and the science as much, because she's going to explain it through that lens. And I think that marriage is what brings that together. But I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's a lot of work, but everything we do is a lot of work. It's a lot.
The kids are working together collaboratively anyway. They're already working in groups. We're just giving them some vocabulary so that they can name what they're doing, because they're already either giving and receiving feedback well or not, or owning team outcomes or not. We're just kind of giving them some vocabulary. So they're doing all of this work already. So to me, it's a vocabulary shift in some cases more than it is an extra piece of work. It's just calling that responsible collaborator instead of let's work in groups today.
And the large scope of the work falls on, frankly, on the student. And so our job as principals at central office, as a teacher/librarian, is to incorporate and embed all of those elements and aspects of our district's profile into the work that students are already doing. So, luckily, like the systems that we have designed in a great way, it's a lot of student work, but the prep work on a teacher, that's where we come in to help them support their instruction with structure, systems, and time. Like when I was a building level principal, in order to support teachers with this work, we created a profile of a graduate planning period where I redid my school's schedule to give a second planning period 1 day a week to all teachers in order to just give them time to dedicate to this work. So I think that's a very valid point, and one that we're conscious of, but there's always an answer when it comes to rebuilding your structures to allow them to support the initiatives that are important to kids.
Thank you all. Andre has been taking some diligent notes to be able to reflect for us and pull all this back together through that lens of the design principles. So Andre, please
Hello,
help us with that.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm Andre Rapper from the Center for Assessment, and I'm just going to take a few minutes to maybe underscore a few points that this conversation today brought out for me and for our work. So I'm not going to read 4 pages of notes. But the first thing I think that we all should recognize is that when I listen to you, and I think we all listen to you, we see immediately this principle that, wonderful districts who are doing the lead work want to pursue excellence in their work, right? And they want to continuously improve. And they're very systematic, principled, and intentional in the way they go about this and to how they reflect about the work, what's working, what's not. And so when people talk about design principles, there's often this, almost like this distance that gets created when you see that on paper, right? And it's sort of, the language gets convoluted, it sort of seems a bit abstract, but at the end of the day, it's just about saying, how can we make this thoughtful deliberate, intentional thinking, and the practice is visible to others. And that's something I think where context really matters, right? So I feel like when you see a 2-minute video of somebody, a kid in elementary, middle, or high school giving a defense, and somebody were to say, well, is this a sound assessment moment? Or is this well aligned with the instructional practices? You can't answer that with 2-minute video. You have to have a much deeper understanding and conversation with people who are doing the work and reviewing that in order to really get an appreciation for the systemic interdependencies and all the work that goes into this. And so when we talk about design principles for this work, you talked about the tight and loose kind of connections, right? It is exactly that. At what level of the system are what kinds of people articulating ideas that are tight prescriptions and what can be looser? And that's the same problem at the state level. It's the same problem at a district level. It's even the same problem at the school level, right? And so I think confusions can arise sometimes for us, and I want us all to keep that sort of in mind in this work. When we start mixing levels up very quickly and in the same conversation and with people who have very different responsibilities and spheres of influence for their work, right? So when we're talking about the design principles, those 12 that seem like 12's already too much. 3 themes are maybe, a way to get a handle on that. Those came out of the work from the Accelerating Innovation Committee, not just me, obviously. It was, other facilitators and other leaders of the committee, many of us who are here, the members. And it was really asking them to articulate some basic values and principles for designing and by implication implementing and evaluating what works about a state accountability system. And that's a very particular kind of problem, right? It's sort of like a picture and a snapshot that you're taking. Now, if someone says, what are the ways in which these leaders here are being principled about the design of work around Portrait of a Graduate, or even more specifically, let's take that slice, defenses of learning, click, you can take a picture of that. That's a different kind of problem. It's related conceptually to the other one, but you walk through that very differently. And when I took notes, I don't know how many notes you took. I had 2 pages of individual design decisions that they made in terms of the way teachers are being onboarded, about the way they engage with their students, about what kind of rubrics exist, about what exists in a database. And behind that are additional design decisions, right? So it's not just about the video exemplars. It's about, do we cover the range of student performances? Do we cover students from all different kind of backgrounds, first language backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, or home environments, all of that. So I think the task for all of us when we are working with design principles at some level is I would encourage all of us to say, let's first of all make sure that we all talk about the same frame, freeze that, and then talk about the principled intentionality and the way to sort of walk through that, capture that, and act upon that. And part of the work of the different working groups is, and hey, let's advertise this, Karen Perry and I, and Donnie Tran here, he's not looking at me. Come on, don't ignore me. Donnie Tran. We're having, for example, a working group on district supports it's called District Supports for Quality, but it's really about this kind of work, saying how can we learn from use cases like this? How can we engage with you to ask what other resources do you think would be worthwhile sharing? What other resources could maybe the state or could regional cooperatives for cooperative leaders bring to the problem to help support the professional development and the diffusion of this in the state? So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, we'll make it as practical and accessible, but still as systematic and intentional as we can. So we have that later. I do want to close quickly with a question for you all about this notion of facilitators and barriers, right? So you have your own ecosystem in which you operate. But the question earlier came up, and I don't know from the lady in the back, I didn't overhear your name, but the question essentially about what's currently existing in federal accountability requirements and therefore what the Kentucky Department of Ed has to do and how that interacts with your work. How are you experiencing that currently? Do you experience that as a real tension, or is it just sort of things that are relatively easily integrated? And if so, what are sort of the state level or federal facilitators or barriers in this work that make it either easier or harder? Can I end on that?
They're all looking at me. That's fine. So really good question, Andre. So again, thinking about the unique context of Shelby County Public Schools with our demographics, one of the, and I think it's a quasi-state and federal assessment expectation, we have a very large number of newcomer students. So in the traditional assessment and accountability system, our newcomers, if they are KSA eligible kids, they get a 1-year exemption, right? They still have to take the test just for participation purposes, and then they'll move forward. Year 2, the expectation is for a student who maybe is 14, coming to our community from Guatemala and has not been in school, period, full stop. The expectation is that student has the 1-year exemption, the next year they're taking the ACT. That, in a good way, I think is positively addressed with our defense protocol and our exhibition systems. But it's a tough piece to grapple with, because I really feel passionately, I think everyone up here does, that we've developed a system that truly allows every single student to shine. And it's tough when you have a kid who can give a defense or give an exhibition in their native language, and we are saying that we value you and see you for who you are with this and what you've accomplished, and then you have to turn around and go to take the ACT in English after being in the country with limited to no English abilities. That is very, very taxing. But we're not going to stop what we're doing. We're gonna keep on meeting kids' needs. But that is I'll get off my soapbox. That's one of those that just, no, I'm not. I'm going to say one listening. That's just one that really hurts me for kids. That the current system is set up in that way to make any child feel like they have not accomplished what they are capable of.
Anybody else want to speak to this?
That's just what I feel about the assessment system. I mean, not all kids are test takers, but in a defense in this system, all kids can be successful. From Artavia's MSD kids to my kid who might not be a test taker to your kid who can do it in their native language. Every child can be successful in this because they're given the ability to be who they are. And the assessment system doesn't do that. It punishes students in a way for that. And this system highlights students in their area where they can be successful. Everybody is going to be successful in one way or they're going to fail. If you tell a fish he's got to climb a tree, he's going to fail. I don't care how great of a fish and swimmer he is. But if you put the fish in the water and then you give him an opportunity, he's going to succeed.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, one more. Julia, please.
We're pretty clear about what we're assessing in our defenses,
Right.
and we're not assessing their ability necessarily to solve a math problem. We're assessing them on their ability to describe the context of what they were learning when they were learning it. They understand this is what we were doing. They understand how what that work that they were doing connects to a skill that we're valuing. So we're assessing their ability to demonstrate a skill. Our fourth band is metacognition. So we're assessing their ability to reflect on their learning. And then we're assessing their ability to be an effective communicator. We're not assessing their science skills or their math skills to a degree, but they're using that work as evidence. But sometimes it is the poor quality of work that they did and the feedback that they got that's what we're assessing, is their ability to recognize what they learned when they did that. We're not assessing academic content specifically. That is not what we're assessing anyway.
Yeah, and I appreciate that clarification, because Gretchen said earlier, in particular, and I appreciate that too, right? This notion that in a balanced assessment system, different assessments obviously have different purposes, or therefore it's not either or, it's not binary, it's not like a switch, but they're foreground different components, and they give you different kinds of evidence for different aspects. And you always talked about how intentional you were about both designing your, for example, defenses for these particular purposes, but also then looking at what happens, both the actions and the artifacts, and sort of the longitudinal history, right, of like where students came from, the journey. And I think both within the grade, I would argue, and I've heard that also like their longer journey for those who are longer in the district and in the state, even potentially across multiple grades, because it's so vertically coherent in your system. So yeah, so that was fantastic. And I think for the assessments, I think again, I think this idea of saying, like, when we talk about assessment design, there's either an individual assessment or a new assessment experience, like a performance-based assessment or the assessment system, it's really good for everybody to sort of be clear about what the foreground and the background sort of purposes are, to configure that, like a mixing board in music is my favorite metaphor for that, and make sure that it's clear to people. And also, last thing I want to say, and then I'll give the floor back, is this idea of different entry points, right? So when you go to working groups, for example, this afternoon, essentially it's different entry points for talking about different aspects of this problem. And they, you know, at the end, you need systemic thinking for putting this all together. But for example, a defense of learning is not something that goes into an accountability indicator. A defense of learning is an experience that is embedded in context, that has a longitudinal trace of activities and information and evidence and engagements before that. So if somebody says, like, you know, we want to create an indicator, let's create an indicator that values or that represents, it doesn't represent defenses of learning, it represents some evidence about some kind of aspects of what children have learned and developed, and maybe even contextually what the school leadership and the teachers have been doing in order to facilitate that. And so I think that's the conversation to have at that level of sort of thoughtfulness and specificity, right? So that we don't get too coarse and too global and throwing either entire ideas away just because it sounds like too corrupting, or that we embrace them too quickly because we haven't really made those connections. So I want to just encourage all of us, along with my facilitators, when you go into working groups and when you think through problems, to try to differentiate those aspects and then be clear about what that means for the design decisions that are made at a particular level, either locally or the district level, school level, district level, or the state level. Gretchen, did you want to say something too? Well, Sarah is, and by the way, we gave everybody from Shelby County a big round of applause. I want to give Sarah, let's do this again. But I think Sarah Snipes deserves an applause for being an amazing moderator of this. I want to see a podcast with her coming out soon. Okay. Sarah, do you want to, no, cut, no. Do you want me to give this back to Gretchen? Yeah.
Thank you. And again, thanks to all of you. It's a big deal for you to be willing to share all of this with us so vulnerably. Like, we just have on a QR code on the wall all your kids' defenses. Well, not all of them, a sample of them, right? It's pretty great. And I think speaks to the way this group is trying to work, which is to be vulnerable and curious with one another such that we are allowed to think differently about things. I just had one takeaway listening to you all, which is that I think, and I was thinking about your comment too, you know, when the folks who created it created our current sort of view of standards and testing and accountability, there was an idea that we were testing that we thought would really work, which was we're only going to define the what. When you were talking before about what and how, like, we'll only define the what, we'll only hold accountable for the what, and therefore everyone will be able to choose how. And we really believed that was going to work. What's turned out to be true is the pressure applied to that what has made a very strong incentive for a very narrow pathway in terms of how. And what I hear in this conversation today is, if we could figure out a way at a state level to make some room for something that is locally defined, then a local community could make a decision about how with your community that you feel really good about. And you could use something. In this case, you're using defenses of learning, but like, you could use something, whatever the thing is, right? That actually sets a direction in terms of how you mean for learning to happen in your community, what role you imagine for teachers and learners, what kind of partnership you imagine with families and with community. That's a thing that no one really wants the state to decide, right? Like, that's why we have these standards that only say what right now, because no one wants the state to be like, this is how you do all your things. But we don't quite have room yet for you all to define how in a way that then the state gets to learn about and recognize. And I appreciate your comments, Andre, about like, it's not like we're going to subset, like, what are the scores your students got in your performances? And then there'll be a score about that goes to, it's not going to be that. It has to be something different. So I'm glad you're vulnerable with us. I'm glad we can be curious about it and we can come up with some different ideas. Speaking of different ideas, we have a different idea about the agenda than we did this morning. which is that hearing from the L3s is going to happen after lunch instead of before lunch. Thanks for being flexible with us, those of you who are doing that sharing. Appreciate you. But before you go to lunch, I do want to ask that you mill around a little bit and you listen to some of the voices and look at some of the evidence of learning that's on the walls in the room. And in the spirit of accountability, I'm going to say the accountability for us to engage with those voices is when we come back from lunch, the first thing Karen is going to ask you to do is to share at your tables what's one voice you heard and why is that the one you chose to talk about. So listen to more than one, because otherwise you're not going to be able to say why you chose it. Or you could say it's the only one I listened to, but that's an embarrassing reason. Don't have that be your reason, okay? Listen to a few voices and be ready to share back with your table mates about why is that the voice you wanted to share with them when you came back after lunch, okay? And we'll let you know when we're ready to progress upstairs for lunch. We'll kind of pause the room and give directions about all that. So right now, take a little break, mill around, listen to some voices, and enjoy one another. I hope you had a good lunch. I enjoyed a wrap where I thought the secret ingredient was going to be apricot jelly, but it was actually bacon. It had both. I know. It was a real surprise, a pleasant one. So as promised, we're going to start with just a few minutes at tables, which also means if you have folks who are kind of making their way back in, if you could just welcome them to the table and give them these directions when they come. At tables, share a little bit about what's one voice that you listened to, and why is that the one you wanted to share at your table? What's one voice you listened to off of the posters in the room? And why is that the voice you wanted to share at your table? So take a moment, get your mind focused. And again, welcome the people to your tables and help them understand that's what we're doing. We're going to take about 6 minutes. All right, 6 minutes. One voice you heard, and why is that the one you're sharing? Thank you, thank you, thank you. You want to go ahead, slide? Do you have the clicker? We got. There you go. All right. So we are transitioning. We have joining us Travis Hamby and Holly Elmore, who are members of the L3 community. And we've asked those folks to come and share again because, again, just like the voices we have up in the room on the walls here, the L3s are people doing work that should be informing what we are doing here. And the L3s met recently. For a while, our slide had the date of the meeting, and then we realized that the date's not important to you all. But they met very recently in the month of March. And part of what they did was engage with these design principles, right? And think a little bit about how does their work relate to these? How might their work inform the way these principles matter when we ask that other question? Not like, what does it mean for my local balance system of assessment, but what about that can be reflected in a state system? So that's what those design principles are helping us with. Whew. I just got tongue-tied all by myself. So they're going to share a little bit about that. We have just a few slides for that conversation. And then Donnie is also going to share another connection that came up in the L3 work. This is all in the spirit, again, of like, what can we hear from people in the field who are doing work that should inform us as we continue with our work? All right. Thank you so much.
So on March the 6th, we joined as L3 communities in this very room. And we were able to take the work of the AI committee and look through the lenses of the themes that they have put together. And we heard from different districts, Bullitt, Johnson, and Fleming counties all were able to present. And then we were able to look at our own local context and focus groups and to discuss how do we see ourselves in that work, given the examples that those districts provided, and having that reflection time and being able to, what are our questions? What are we still needing to grapple with? What policies are preventing us from doing the work and moving forward? And then at the end of that conversation, we were able to break back out into those thematic groups, and we looked at what are the common trends? What's going on across the state, or what are our key learnings? What did we learn from those conversations? And then what are still some areas of support that we need? And so in your handouts today, you can refer to the one-pagers that were created on that day from the works and the focus groups. And it kind of looks like this, minus my notes at the bottom. But you can look through each of those one-pagers. We're not going to do a deep dive today, but that is there for your review if you want to know what the takeaways were from that meeting. I know one thing that as we are working in Washington County, one of the great things about having those design principles and considering those themes, when you're thinking about building structures and systems and putting things in place that people can do sustainably, those design principles help us to consider what have we not thought about yet. And so that helps us to anchor our processes to ensure that all audiences, all members are well informed, and that we can take the work that we are doing and make it similar across the state. All of our stories are different, but they all share the similarities throughout. And so that was one of the greatest takeaways that I had. The other takeaway that I had from that meeting was this is flexible. This work is hard, but it is flexible, and you can start at any degree that you want. As a district, if you just want to try one thing, you can build upon that one thing, and that students we do not have to box them in. As we consider all of the different individuals that come to the table, that we want to hear their story, we can create a scenario for that student to be successful. And nobody has written your script. No one has told you what it has to look like. You have that flexibility. And so that was my takeaway from the L3 meeting on the 6th.
Great job, Holly. Thank you so much. I was thinking about this, and how we were asked, the local laboratories of learning, to identify one of the design principles that was talked about a little earlier today. And so for me, when I was forced to decide what the work we're doing in Allen County, how it connects, I had a hard time choosing a design principle to really focus on. And I think that's important because I think it validates to some degree what we're trying to accomplish with the design principles, that the work that we are doing is very interconnected, and I can show multiple connections to those design principles. Now, I want to push to say, I don't think they're quite refined enough yet, right? That there's still work to be done. And hopefully we're approaching this work as these are not final, but we're testing the design principles as well as testing some other things within the local laboratories of learning. So as we shared and as we talked about it, what resonated with me from sharing about the L3 work was that it's much like a good sermon on a Sunday morning. And the preacher has preached the message, and he's prepared, and there's 100 people in the room who's listened to the message. And then you go to a small group where a small group of people are talking about the message. And it's very interesting to me always when I do that, how everybody applies the message within their context. And I sit there and scratch my head, and I like, were they even at the same place I was on Sunday morning, right? Did they hear the same message that I heard? And the reality is they did, but it was about their context, right? And so as the people come together and they're talking about how it applies in their context, then we learn from one another, right? We then learn from one another, and we begin to see different perspectives about what's happening. And so I relate that to the L3 work. As we talked about the design principles, as we learned and heard from one another, we reached greater clarity about what the meaning of the design principle was, and what could be celebrated, what was bubbling up as it related to that, and what we still needed to learn about, what was still a little bit confusing to us, which is the power, I think, of what you have in front of you. I want to challenge the group for just a moment to say, you have local laboratories of learning at work and testing the things that we're talking about. I would want to continue to challenge this full group to not settle on a sliver of an accountability model being what we're talking about today, not adding something on that is only now going to account a small percentage of the accountability. To me, I would say the moonshot is bigger than that, right? So how can we listen and really truly learn and embrace what we're hearing from the people like Washington County, like Allen County, like Fleming County, and so many others that we can name. They're testing things that are working and to be celebrated. And you can read about it in those papers that you have before you. And I want to take us back to a slide. Can we go to 2 slides forward? This is one of the things that L3 started out early on thinking about how these 4 habits, how can we take these 4 habits, implement them, use them within our communities, and create, if you go over here to the side, see that real ownership among educators, families, and community members around new systems of assessment and accountability. So our goal here is using these habits to create a new assessment and accountability model. That's what you have people testing. So how can we learn and listen to them? And how can that result in a system that is more relevant to the needs and that stakeholders have a better understanding and ownership of those systems? So that's what your local laboratories of learning are using to make this work. Now, we're very fortunate that in partnership with the Center for Innovation and Education, now go back to the previous slide, the Center for Education and Education, we're super excited about this. We were asked to be part of a grant project. It's a joint project with UK Center for Education and Allen County Schools, where we're actually training up some researchers, student researchers, that are going to help with this. I think we're like 10 student researchers, and then what we're calling an Allen County Design Crew, ACDC. That'll connect with some of you. ACDC, Allen County Design Crew, that we're going to formulate some questions, and we're going to explore this. What is, through that implementation of empathy, co-creation, reciprocity, forgot the 4th one, inclusion, how can is that making a difference? Is it doing the things that we hoped it would do? Is it creating that ownership among our stakeholders, that level of excitement about the work that we're doing? So more to tell, because we want to learn. Hopefully we can create something and we can get that feedback that we can share with the group, and we can continue to learn together about how those habits have an impact, how the local laboratories of learning is then informing the whole KUWL Council to really leverage the change and accomplish the moonshot that we're after. That's all I have. I'm turning it over to somebody. Donnie, there you go.
Great. So one other connecting point between the L3 community of practice and the KUWL Council that we had a discussion about just last week was a zoom in to this principle. And just to draw the connective tissue a little bit more, the voices we heard from around the room are helping us to see what people want. The United We Learn vision helps us articulate what's the future system, what does it need, what do we need it to do for us? The design principles are the way in which we need to design the system to match up with that hope, with that aspiration. And this design principle, number 12, is the one that the L3 community engaged with most recently, just in April. You can't talk about all 12 of them at once. It's a little overwhelming. But this one was of particular interest. So just to read it out, just the first line, it is about designing to minimize opportunities for system corruption. Because L3 leaders have to deal with this within the context of their district. They don't want corruption of the prototype for their schools. And they don't want their schools to game the system, right? So they have to think about how to lead in that way. So we wanted to better understand what lessons they were learning, because this is an important one. And we want to highlight this because it tells us something really important for us as a KUWL Council. District leaders want accountability. They want to feel accountable to high performance. They want to feel accountable to serving all students well. They're not shying away from it. They're asking this question just like we are for them. And so we're united in this need and this desire to minimize system corruption. And so I just want to highlight 3 just quick lessons, and we're going to continue to refine how we're learning about this and what they're learning about this. But on the next slide, these are just some early thoughts from the L3 members who were there on Thursday of last week. So this is fresh off the press. So what they told us is that when they are thinking about minimizing system corruption for their district, they don't put weight onto the prototypes too early. Because then you're like, oh, people will start to freak out and they start to then act in ways that are going to get them the most points. And that starts to corrupt the system. So don't do that too early. That's what they've learned. Second, this is a wordy one. Layer on quality control systems as they are needed locally. Provide state guidance and guardrails carefully. So what they try to do is let schools learn how to do stuff. And then as they run into problems where they need guidance, then give them frames and guidance, rubrics, tools. If you do it too early, it constrains some of that creativity. I think we heard that from Shelby County, right? Let people lead, right? And then give them the supports they need as they start telling you that they need them. And they were recommending that the state also follow that same idea. Like, don't layer on too many controls too early. It will constrain us in ways that will minimize the effectiveness of the prototype. Third, use transparent. I just realized I have this monitor screen. This is amazing. I'm just like, look at that. So why am I looking that way? Use transparency and public learning to build trust. So often what we are doing is when we are tinkering with something, we do it in a room where it feels safe to us. But what they had learned was that they actually needed to do a lot of that tinkering in public and show people that they were trying something and then explaining how it was working and not working. And doing that in public actually helped people see that this is evolving. They're open to feedback. It actually helped build a deeper level of trust. So these are just 3 initial learnings from the folks who were there last Thursday. The community of practice is an amazing group of people, as you just heard Travis, speak as one of these leaders. We're going to continue to, engage with these design principles as we are learning about them and hopefully translating that into the next system design. Okay.
Thank you, Mary. I'm prone to tripping, so get that out of my way. Okay, I am going to talk about all the pretty papers that are in your packets. First of all, we have a roadmap. So go ahead and pull that out. We're going to talk a little bit about this roadmap. Now, first thing I want you to notice is that it does say draft. Okay. But we think we captured a lot of what we need to do in order to get to our moonshot. So you'll see that we have our moonshot statement on there: to build a prosperous Kentucky. We will launch an accountability system that is meaningful and useful to all of our learners. Our goal to hit by the summer of 2026 is an approved, reimagined accountability system. And we're way down here. We're way down here. We've been at this for 1.5 years, but we're at the beginning of this roadmap because we're just now talking about prototypes. And remember what Gretchen told us this morning. This first prototype is an idea, right? It's not even something that we're handing over other than an idea about what this system could be. So that's where we are. And we're going to spend time this afternoon and tomorrow in work groups really trying to make some headway in these prototypes. So there are a couple of work groups that I'll talk about in just a minute that are really going to help with that. All right, and then we know that we need to share those prototypes both with KDE and the community. So that'll be step 2. Again, this is pretty aggressive because all these first steps are to be done this summer. So thank you for being here. Then we have legislative awareness. We heard back in November from both Representative Tipton and others who were here that said, don't forget to include the legislators early and often. And so we put that in here for this summer as well. We have a new commissioner coming on board. He is very much embracing what we are doing here. We are excited to have him come on board. I think he's going to be a great advocate for us speaking to the legislators, as will Dr. Jim Flynn, who is going to become our vice chair and ultimately chair in a year. So I think having the two of them speak to legislators together is going to be something really powerful, and I'm really looking forward to that. Then we have the testing phase, all right? And this is, again, I think Gretchen talked about this morning. This is where we put it out there, we hear what's coming back from the field. KDE tries to collect some of that feedback, and we as a council talk about that feedback and make it better so that we can get to that thing that we ultimately are able to hand off and start looking at as an actual model. By the winter of this year, we hope to recommend an accountability model to KDE. And then spring of 2025, recommend a model to the board. And then engage more with the interim education committee in the fall of 2025 to be prepared to have something approved in 2026. All right. How's that feel to everybody? I see some nods. Is this helpful? Good, good. If anything doesn't feel comfortable about it, again, it's draft. Let us know. Any of the facilitators around, as you're working in your work groups this afternoon, use this to figure out, like, where are you going? When do you need to get there? And so as questions come up, talk with your facilitators about that. Yeah. No, our next meeting would be in the fall. So I'm going to move into work groups because this may help a little bit. So these next 4 pages that you have, all these colorful pages, are the work groups. And we did start working in work groups back in the fall, and we've got really good feedback from all of you that you liked doing that. So it's not that we have done away with our committees. We've done away with the word standing for our standing committees, which only means that you are not required to meet on a monthly basis as a standing committee. Meet as you need to meet with your committees. But what we really want to do is really start fast forwarding this work. And we felt like the best way to do that would be with work groups. So breaking into some smaller groups where you have a real interest. So you're going to notice these 4 things are quite different. And you have the opportunity to choose where you want to go. This is not a lifelong commitment. This is a work group commitment. Your input is greatly needed today and tomorrow. Your voices need to be heard so that we can get to these prototypes quickly. We have partners that we rely on very heavily, and these partners are going to take your input today and really help us to get to these prototypes so that we can get to that testing phase as quickly as possible. All right. If you want to continue to be a part of that over the summer, they will continue to have meetings with their work groups as needed. But we really want to get as much accomplished this afternoon and tomorrow, as much as we can while you are all here, because we know this is when we have the greatest engagement with everyone. All right, does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah. How do we get to a prototype? Yeah. So again, this is the idea piece of it, right? And so that's what these work groups are going to be working on. Andre, I don't know if you want to be, if you are able to explain this any better, since you're going to be running one of these.
So I think the hope here is if a lot of good work can happen in the working groups today, and we get some number of prototype ideas identified. I don't think it's one, I think it's some number of them. It may also be some progression of them. I know that's come up in some conversations for folks like this might be a first step, but we'll need step 2 and 3 also. So the groups are going to haggle with that. They're going to have some ideas. And these working groups are going to be able to keep meeting over the summer and also keep sharing information with all of us over the summer. And like my working group is the community engagement and community voice group. We're going to be working on together trying to figure out what can we do when those are ready to share so that we can help everybody here have those in a format that works to share with a lot of people and do some testing on their own, as well as how can it be taken into the department for that testing. So that stuff is going to happen. It's just going to be a little bit asynchronously. And if we get into it, honestly, and we're like, man, asynchronous isn't working, then maybe we have to revisit timeline, right? I mean, this has draft on it for a reason. Also, a new chief is about to arrive here, and I don't know, they might have ideas about timeline too. But this is a timeline that I think makes sense given the way that policy development happens in the state and that we should try and align with. And I think we can do this work asynchronously to get there, such that we will have some ideas that have been tested. So when we gather again, we'll have feedback to bring to one another. And that little iterative circle that's on there is something that we can do together in the fall. Does that feel right? Mm-hmm. Does that help, Travis? Yeah, it ought to be. Yep. Yep. Oh, I was going to give this back to you, but you're ahead.
Well, you're actually going to be joining me anyway. Are there any other questions about that before we move on to the actual work groups? All right, we're going to give each of the facilitators of these work groups an opportunity to pitch their group, to try to get folks to come to their group. And then, so as you're hearing them, well, actually, we're gonna hear all of them first, and then Susan is going to open up these QR codes that are at the top of each page, and you will sign up for your group by clicking on that QR code. All right, we need that because we have rooms of different sizes available for these breakouts. So we need to know how many people are going to be in each breakout group in order to assign you to a room. Make sense? All right, so I am going to start, since Gretchen and I are up here, we are going to start with the purple, which is engaging and communicating with communities.
Go ahead and put the other slide up. I'm gonna say quickly.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So, and we can refer back to this like as we go with each team here. I just want to be clear, the working groups are not like focused on defenses of learning, but we just spent the whole morning learning about these. And so we tried to figure out like, what's a way we can help folks understand what these working groups are offering. One way is to make some connections to that in terms of, as you were going through the morning, what part of that were you curious about? Again, not because you're going to go just work on defenses of learning. That's not what's happening. That was just an example this morning. But if you found yourself thinking this way, like I'll just say for our group, in the engaging and communicating with communities, if you found yourself today being curious about how students, families, teachers, and community members feel about defenses of learning, that's what our group is about.
You're all about it.
All about. And again, our paper's not as nice
You
as Andre's
too can
paper,
do these interviews.
but you too could do these interviews. And for us, what we imagine that being, like I said just a minute ago, is we want to keep bringing voices in, a broader set of voices than we have in the room. That's like an ongoing job of our group, to do that ourselves and to support you all in doing that by capturing voices and bringing them in the way that we did today, and probably other ways too. Also, there will be a time when there are some prototype ideas that need to be shared. And we think our group is actually well positioned to help say, like, you know, could we just get, I'm sorry, put you on the spot again, Jennifer. Can we just get Jennifer on video talking about this prototype? And can we share that video with teachers? Because we think that way of sharing about the prototype is going to actually be accessible to them. Our group is really interested in how can we communicate outward in a way that is clear and accessible and inviting? And what can we do to bring voices in such that this group benefits from a wide range of voices from the state? So I don't know if you care about community, like you might want to come to our group. That's all I'm saying.
That's what it's all about. All right, we'll go ahead and invite, let's have Karen come up next.
Hi there. I am making a pitch for you to join District Supports for Quality. First of all, it is the blue paper if you would like to read more about it. It is the nicest paper out of all of the color options. If you care about paper quality and you care about quality of assessment systems, join this blue group. One of the things I was thinking about when I was listening to Shelby County talk about their really robust assessment system, all of that was really hard-earned wisdom on their part through just doing and learning and reflecting and iterating and continue to go. Part of what our group wants to do is how do we capture all of that hard-earned wisdom and how do we accelerate the learning across lots of other districts who want to do something like that, right? So we'll think first probably about defenses of learning, but there's some other concepts on here. A lot of the L3 districts, for example, are generating dashboards. So how can we really work with districts who want to make sure that their dashboards, their defensive learning system, all these things are technically sound. So they are trustworthy to communities, so that everyone knows what it is and how to make sure that it is high quality evidence that's coming out of these assessment systems and the accountability systems that go. Lastly, I would say Andre wanted me to promise a signing bonus for our group. I don't think we can afford that. We can't promise a signing bonus, but we can promise good snacks and fun, right? Donuts, yes, tomorrow.
She did it.
Okay.
She did it. All right.
Well, much like the color yellow, the learning experiences in districts across our state are bright and vibrant. Y'all really set the bar here. So the Learning with Local Districts group will really just take advantage of the wealth of knowledge of experiences that educators and school and district leaders are facilitating, creating, and designing across the state, and helping to support kind of the ways that we capture that, very similar to Karen, and how we can capture and share and spread that learning for folks across stakeholder groups in any way that it's relevant to them. And so looking at resources like the innovation guide that's on your table, as well as learning and talking with L3s and folks in those communities, we will create an artifact and product that helps us start to bring these vibrant learning practices and experiences together so that we can share and use those to inform the other work groups as well.
Thank you. Lastly, the menu of options. It is also the green. We are, as a working group, we are going to continue the good progress that is made from the Accelerating Innovation Standing Committee, as well as the System of Systems work group. We're going to continue that progress in the fact that those groups have generated a lot of ideas around a system of systems, and particularly a menu of options within that system of systems. So they've generated these ideas. We're going to take a deeper dive into those options, looking at the particular design principles. So we're going to look at those and prioritize some of those options that we've been discussing. So if you are interested in taking a dive into those options and within that menu of options and looking particularly at those design principles. And then Travis just encouraged us all to really look at the moonshot and have an idea or generate shooting big. So if you're interested in that, in designing an accountability system that meets that moonshot, please join the menu of options. As KDE, I represent the Office of Assessment and Accountability. We do not have in the locked drawers upstairs the accountability plan. we are here to listen and learn from each of our members to develop these proposals that will get us to that moonshot and push on that federal as well as some state legislation. So we want you to give us your ideas on how to do that within that system of systems and menu of options.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yes.
I'm like trying to understand right now, like when we talk about prototypes, right, versus menu of options. So are we talking about prototypes within a menu of options, or are we talking truly about prototyping an accountability model? Because this says on the green sheet, a menu of options basically as an accountability indicator.
Yeah.
So just help me with the
It's a really good question.
prototypes,
Yeah.
menu of options, and the connection.
Yeah. There are a bunch of us who are facilitators who actually were just having this discussion in this same room yesterday. I'm going to try and capture that conversation. I invite anyone else who is here to offer amendments to what I'm about to say. But I think what we're talking about is there is, in this idea of having a system of systems, one way we might do that, like one prototype idea about that is actually a menu of options, right? There may be other ways to have a system of systems too, and that's why I noticed, Jennifer, when you introduced the group, you used both of those labels, systems of systems and menu of options group, because that's like working on those two things. There ought to be prototypes that are sort of at that level that are like, how might we have, like, let's say you pursue menu of options, okay? Just because it's a concrete example I can speak to. If we were to have a menu of options, how might we design that in a way that doesn't challenge any federal parameters? That's a thing we could choose to do. Or how might we have a menu of options that really just only challenges state law? You can, as a state, like Wyoming has this, they actually have 2 accountability systems as a state. It is a little cumbersome because they have a lot of repeated stuff, right? But it means they've been able to carve out some things as a state that they do differently than the federal expectations, and they just have done that. So that would be one other prototype you might develop around a menu of options. A whole other one is like, what if we had a menu that was wild and free and willing to challenge federal policy? So there's prototypes at that level that are like, what is the sort of accountability design? There may also be prototype ideas that are closer to what you're working on right now in Allen County that are like, if we had the flexibility of a menu of options, what might I like to plug into that? Because the state probably can't accommodate like an infinite number of local options, but it can be more than one, right? So there's some number of things that ought to be prototyped that could be options into that too. So I know it's confusing because we're using the word prototype to describe both, but it's because functionally they're the same thing for us, which is they are ideas we mean to test. But I think we mean to test ideas at this level of like the overall kind of approach. And we also mean to test ideas eventually that are like, what might be components of that?
From this meeting,
Yeah.
prototypes
Yeah.
are going to emerge.
Yeah.
Right? But it seems like to me, as listening to you, that the prototype, because the others don't appear about communication about prototype, right? And quality around the measurement. So, like, how do other prototypes emerge from the next day and a half?
I think so. You're asking at the highest level? Yeah. I mean, I think that is the task of your working group actually, is to consider that.
So the menu of options isn't something just that's been arbitrarily decided, Travis. We've spent the past year and a half as an accelerating innovation committee really exploring our options, reflecting, discussing deeply how we might uphold our design principles. The one focused on today was valuing local flexibility. And given the different essential features that we've discussed and our work system of systems working group discussed in November, menu of options was identified as a key essential feature that we want to explore and prototype around. And that's what our working group will be using to develop multiple different prototypes using that menu of options idea to allow us to create sandboxes and explore. That doesn't mean this is the only way this could have happened, but it is something that emerged as resonant out of our committee work over the past year and a half.
I mean, I think you should join that group. Oh, they do. But I mean, I think you have a curiosity there that I think you're really not going to satisfy unless you go. So I'll just say that's my personal advice to you. That's uninvited, but I'm going to share it. Okay. Other questions? Okay.
Yeah. The QR codes are open. So hopefully one of those 4 is of deep interest to you. Go ahead and use your phone to click on it. And then Susan will tell us who is going to which room as we see them coming in to sign up. Turn it over to Justin first, who's going to share out on our communications.
Hi, I'm Justin Dunning. I'm a senior at Lyon County High School. I am in the Engaging and Communicating with Communities work group. That's fun.
Crushed it.
Yeah. So first we talked about who the engaging and communicating people, mainly Gretchen and her partners, have reached already. And so they went to Central Kentucky schools. So they had already reached students and teachers and admin members at Central Kentucky schools, but they weren't able to get to like Western Kentucky or Eastern Kentucky, and they weren't able to get parents or business people. And so then we brainstormed new types of people that we wanted to contact. And some of that came up were local business chambers, because our businesses need to be in our schools more. That's a very big belief of mine. Alternative schools and Department of Juvenile Justice schools, because those students need to be represented just as well as public school students. And then parents are also kind of left out of the conversation. And then we talked about going to some larger conferences that happen across the state and pitching not only our questions, but the KUWL Council as a whole, and then connect with them and ask questions. And then we also talked about the questions that we would be asking and how we would revise some of the questions, and we changed the wording a little bit. We looked at some questions that had been used and how did people respond to those questions? How did students respond? And then we looked at questions that hadn't been used yet to kind of think about what we have heard and like how can we, change those questions to make them more accessible. And yeah, so revisions and brainstormings, and these all happen through voice recordings, and you have like a piece of paper that's sideways with you, and it'll tell you how to do voice recordings and what questions to ask, and I'm sure she's going to give out a new list of questions that has new suggestions on it, so keep a lookout for that. And then there's an email address that's super easy, because I did it yesterday with the Commissioner Student Advisory Council. It's super easy to send in, so. That's what's happening in Engaging and Communicating with Communities work group.
Excellent. Okay. What's the name of my group again? Local districts. What's the Learning with Local Districts.
Okay.
Got it.
Yeah, I forgot. I'm Erica Ranicky. I'm a parent and teacher in Fayette County, and our group is Learning with Local Districts. I don't know why I can't remember that, but it's just my brain has too many other things at the end of the year going on. Anyway, we basically talked about the need to create something like a site map. The goal of our group, from what we could tell, was that we need to figure out how to let districts and people within the districts collaborate as they are on this journey, figure out how to match up the people who are brand new to project-based learning or brand new to Portrait of a Learner with other districts and schools that have been doing it for a while. And we're focusing on, from the viewpoint of the CAO, what's that stand for? Chief Academic Officer, because we know that there's multiple viewpoints that will likely use this if it works the way that we're hoping it does. So we want to focus our prototype on just one so that we can test it out and make sure, is it working the way that we want it to work? Is it going to work, meet the needs of the people, and then figure out what adjustments we need to make so that as it rolls out, we're able to make it easier each time.
All right, I'm Brooke with the District Support for Quality group, and we really spent our time just kind of level setting on the difference between our focus versus the other work group's focus. So we looked at the different goals and what we're going to be thinking about as our group. And in my words, we're really looking at how we can help the local communities think about their quality of implementation while also allowing them to have their own type of structures. and what does that involve? And so our questions, our key insights are how can we stay in a reciprocal responsive relationship between our group and the groups that are already doing Portrait of a Learner, and really getting out of this L3 all the time. So L3 being a focus, but how do we get beyond to other districts doing Portrait of a Learner? How do we ensure a level of quality that inspires trust and confidence? So I thought that was a really good point that Donnie brought up, is that we definitely at the end of this don't want to have a system that people don't have trust in. And so at the end of this, we need to not only have trust within a district, so families and community members and staff members feeling really proud of the system that they have locally, and then that system within systems, so that there's trust within the accountability system on the state level too. And for me, that's also just trust in education. I think that we're losing that a lot with our families and our community members. So this is an opportunity for us to kind of gain that trust back in education broadly. Our next steps is we're going to look at what all is out there and what resources are needed. So understanding how districts are already implementing their Portrait of a Learner and kind of the frameworks and checks and balances that they're already using. What does that mean that they're missing? And then really doing like a focus on the districts that are doing the bright spots, that are doing really, really well. The two kind of things that came up for us is that we want to make sure that districts have permission and are able to tell us how they're iterating every year on their model. So is it Shelby County that said they're on version 4.0? Fleming is on 4.0. So what was the process of going from 1.0 to 4.0? Not only so that we can replicate that continuous improvement process in other districts, but that from the jump, we're giving districts permission to change every year. Like, we expect you to learn and change every year. You don't have to get it right your first year out. So that makes it more of a innovative process than a checkbox. And then how do we avoid force fitting it? So Whitney brought this up with pre-K specifically, that sometimes we talk about K-12 and then we develop a whole thing. And at the end, we're like, and how do we force fit it for pre-K? And so we need to, from the beginning, be thinking about our earliest learners and all the way to 12th grade. But that can also be other special populations that we sometimes at the end of it just kind of force fit in. I think that's all I got.
We got one last one.
Okay. Hi, I'm Suzanne Farmer, and I'm was a part of the menu of options work group. And what was exciting about this work group is it really felt like a natural progression from the Accelerating Innovation committee, which I've been a part of. So we learned a lot about the history of that work, because not everybody in that work group has been a part of that work ongoing. And I'm not going to tell you the whole history of everything that we've done, but part of that, in our most recent, the last time we were together, there were several people across all of the committees that were a part of a menu of options work group. And in that work group, there were several ideas that were generated as possible options, and we ended up deciding to go with a menu of options, which is what our committee, AI, has been studying for the last 6 months. And in that time, we've done a lot of work, but one of the things we did was we had some big brainstorms around what were possible options that could be in a menu of options. And what we did today felt really productive. We worked in 5 small groups to really dig into 5 of the 7 possible options that could be in a menu of options. And we did that in looking at it through the lens of the design principles, the 12 design principles. And I can't speak for all of the small groups because I was in one of those small groups, and we didn't have time for a share out because we were busy working at the end of our work. But I can say that in my work group, we came up with many of the same themes that we're hearing from these other work groups, which was that it would be, so my work group actually was looking at work-based internships and or service learning. And what we realized was there was so much potential there for that to be a really meaningful experience for students, in particular marginalized students. But we also realized that there's a ton of startup work that has to happen. If you're not careful, it could harm students because people might place them in a placement that isn't the best idea for that student, but it's something that the school is forcing onto the students. So it was a lot of this making sure that it's authentic and meaningful for students. There could be some really strong sustainable partnerships within a community, but then you're also working with, you're going to have turnover with jobs in the community. So that's going to be something that would take some continual work. And we found things that were exciting about it as an option, like that it would be a system that could honor some already marginalized students with systems that are already in place, like our students, our MSD students who have job coaches, that could be recognized in an accountability system in a more meaningful way. Is there anyone else that wants to share anything from our group? We're going to keep working on our list in the morning and have some time for share out, but that's where we left off. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so to wrap up today, I've asked a couple folks to give some reflections on the day. So if I can have Justin and Bentley come on up. All right, Justin, you get to go first.
It's me again. All right, so I've taken notes throughout the day, and this is my reflection. I love defenses of learning, and I was telling Dr. Karen Perry that I wish that I could have done defenses of learning in high school. I'll be graduating in like 3 weeks, and I was telling her I wish defenses of learning were something that I could have done in elementary, middle, and high school to kind of help me build a portfolio for myself. And I know my classmates would get good from it too. I can't think of that word right now. Andre could, but I can't. So they could have good stuff come out of that. And there's so many positives to defenses of learning, and there's good work going on here to make sure that like it's not too like forced on students and that kind of stuff. And then community engagement's another one of my big points that I love. I love businesses coming into the schools. I'm the president of my Future Business Leaders of America chapter. So we just held a job fair with 32 businesses. So I love getting businesses into the school because there's a big push for go straight into the workforce after high school, and that's amazing. And so we need to ask businesses what they're looking for in high school students and then help put it into the curriculum and assess if we're having students getting ready to go into the workforce. And also I have to plug Student Voice because I'm on the Commissioner Student Advisory Council, and their big project this year was Student Voice. So keep students in mind and listen to all the students, listen to all of them. And so I wrote this quote down from the Shelby County people this morning, that students are given the ability to showcase their skills through who they are. And the assessment, not great, but the learning defenses and showing who they are, that was really cool. And then the last point I would like to make is I was also talking to Dr. Karen Perry about every district should be an L3 district. I could not understand why these L3 districts were so far ahead of my district, who doesn't have a portrait of a graduate or does student defense presentations. And I thought every district should be a L3 district. So that's what I like to leave you with. So don't forget about us. I'm so excited for the work. I have a sister in 4th grade, and I think her high school experience is going to be a lot different than mine when she gets there. So thank you all for your time. I'll turn it over to Bentley.
Hi, sorry, but I feel like mine might be a little bit shorter than his was. So I just want to say, first of all, I'm grateful for everyone that's here. Like our varied representation, we have members from different stakeholder groups all across Kentucky, and that's great to have. But I'm also excited for the fact that we will soon, not soon, but we're starting to also branch out and hear from other stakeholders and through different groups across Kentucky, and that's very nice. I also just want to put out there, like he said, listen to all students, keep all the schools in mind, state schools, alternative schools, area technology centers, just everyone has a plate to bring to the table. So just let's all listen to everyone.
Good. Great. Okay.
All right, that's a wrap for today. We will start tomorrow at 9 a.m. You can sign in starting at 8:30, and we still have plenty of food back there, so we'll be good to go. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.